Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to everyone to the board meeting of the Betsi Cadwaladr University Health Board on this, the last day of July. A particular welcome to those of you joining us online. Welcome also to the participants in the audience. If you need translation equipment,
somebody will help with that now.
Okay, so I presume that everybody's got their translation equipment. So on we go then. And the first item is apologies. And the apologies we've received this morning have come from Dylan Roberts and Jane Wild. The second item then, declarations of interest relating to the agenda. Does anybody want to express an interest that hasn't been registered already?
Sorry, Chair, I know you don't like any other business, but I think it would be useful just to have an update on industrial relations in Wales. I'm not entirely clear. I know we're not suffering from the strikes they are in England, but I'm not entirely clear whether there's any risk of that with the BMA and the junior doctors and et cetera, et cetera. So perhaps 2 minutes at the end, just to be clear about that.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. We'll consider that item under any other business then at the end of the meeting. So unless there's anything else, we'll go on to the next item, which is minutes of the previous meetings. There was one on the 25th of May and then the 22nd of June. First of all, we look at, or shall we accept the minutes as accurate? May the 25th. Are you all happy to accept those minutes? Thank you. And then the 22nd of June. All happy to accept those?
Chair, there's a slight mistake under HB 13718. Just a correction. With respect to the Irish government, it was the national curricula for medicine and healthcare schools, not clinicians, right? And just further down that paragraph, it was for dental hygienists rather than dental practitioners. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that amendment.
23.139, the smoke-free policy. We had a bit of a discussion about the fact that it wasn't entirely clear on vaping. I mean, I know what the intention is, that vaping is included all the way through. So I think when we approved it, it was subject to the drafting of that being reviewed. So just back to accuracy.
Thank you, Gareth. And we go on to the next item then, if you're all happy to accept the minutes and the action log from the minutes.
Bill, is there anything you wish to say on the action log, please?
Thank you, David. So I'd like to advise the board that there are items marked as complete and that the remainder of the actions on the log are marked to be received by the board by September. So I'd just like to draw attention to that, David, if we can. And just one note, thank you for colleagues who noted this, that there is the last action on the paper is referenced as 137.16. It should be relating to 137.18. So we will make that amendment just so there's clarity about the minute it relates to.
Okay, thank you. Everybody on Phil?
Any other comments or questions, please? Okay, if you're all happy to accept those then. We'll go on to our next item, patient experience, which is a regular item in our board meetings. And this time, we've got a patient experience to do with mental health and the 111 Press 2 service, which is a new service across the health service in Wales. And it's something we've been working on recently. And I'm now going to turn to Teresa to present this item. Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I'd like to thank the mental health team and the patient's experience and carers team for preparing this patient story this time. We've just passed 6 months of the new service since it started, and at the beginning, it was a pilot program really, but now it's been going 24/7 since March. It's a chance for us to hear a story that shows you what kind of service this is, helping patients that need urgent mental health help, or if they've got concerns about family and friends. And it's an excellent service, I must admit. We've got one of the project leads with us today, Becky, sitting in the audience. And I'd like to invite Becky to come forward. But first of all, I'd like you to hear the patient and some of the staff. And if you could please listen to the story, first of all, very important story. Llinnos is going to turn it on now.
My name is Becca Sands. I'm the team manager over here in 101 Washington. In 2020, the Oracle was commissioned by the Welsh Government. The findings were that the mental health system was too complex for the public to access. Referrals were often considered inappropriate and redirected. The public did not have access to mental health services outside of set hours, and around 60% of all mental health service contracts were attempted outside of those hours. The findings of this report were in line with a Healthy Wales, and within months, the proposal to the NHS 111 option 2 service was put forward. Funding agreed by the Welsh Government, and here we are. So the key aims of this service is to provide local care through a national number, improve the cause experience and outcomes, provide early intervention for mental health issues, and information options for self-care and support. Provide navigation to local appropriate services and non-statutory support, reduce the demand and provide advice for our NLU, GP, police, or colleagues, and make seamless referrals to specific mental health services if necessary in a timely manner. We are a passionate team, proud to be developing this service to ensure citizens of North Wales have timely and appropriate access to the right support, promoting the no wrong doors mental health support concept. We are working with colleagues within the crisis care board out for future development. We don't currently have a 24-hour crisis service, and our initial auditing on all response calls shows that up to 40% of those calls may have been diverted if there was a direct access to crisis response services. We continue to strive to grow this service and ensure excellence in every way.
I want to listen to practitioners looking forward to the job and moving forward. It's been really nice to be part of developing the service and it's supposed to carry on. Within the service, we do a treatment assessment to look at the person's, needs, risks, and what we can support with. Within the role as well, we have a great experience all over the entrepreneurship. And that way we can formulate the best pathway for those callers that really feel the best pathway to support. And then that, in turn of the pathways provided, allows us to deliver some more seamless help to be appropriate for their support.
My name is Gareth, and I'm going to tell you about the journey, my journey with the NHS 111. I phone in times of despair and anxiety. When I phone, I don't feel judged. When I phone, I can honestly tell the person on the phone how I feel. And I feel to get the benefits of this service, to be honest. Through my conversations I have with the call handling staff, I feel as if I'm listened to, and also from my anxiety, I'm told coping mechanisms and tricks to help beat this. I feel at times I am not normal and how I'm feeling is not right. I'm told by the cooing voice on the end of the phone that it's perfectly normal to feel this way. In the early hours of the morning and at night, when I'm struggling to sleep, I feel also awkward phoning back then, but my anxiety is soon put aside. When I'm told it is fine, and they're there for me to help me. It's the fact that someone is on the end of the phone when I'm really down and struggling in my mental health and anxiety, and then I can pick up the phone and use the service is one of the tools, my toolbox I use to cope with my anxiety and mental illness. If you are struggling, please pick up the phone and use this service. As someone who uses the service, how I've used it, I feel it is important as any other service that NHS offers. And I feel it can be, and is a lifesaver.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, everyone, for listening. If I can now ask Becky to come forward in case there are any questions.
There's a mic at the end there. Becky's led the service chairman with Dr. Anita Pierce and has got us up and running, not only in that pilot stage, but it's got us to 27 hours, 7 days a week. And I think Becky and the team should be very proud of their achievements. And Ian's with us in the audience as well, who's been leading the crisis work. Matt White and Matt Han, North White.
So this work is part of the regional crisis work in North Wales, and we're making quite a lot of progress at the moment. Excellent. Becky, welcome.
I'm just wondering, is there anything you'd like to add to what Teresa shared with us and what we've seen on that video?
Just from my perspective, the positive impact this service has already had on patients of North Wales, or all citizens of North Wales, and also positive impact on our emergency services, reduction in terms of ambulance attendances at ED with patients who have been struggling with mental health issues, and also our police colleagues, GP colleagues. You know, we have seen a reduction of referrals coming through the 111 press 2 rather than through these statutory services, which has been really positive. And it also supports that no wrong door, making sure individuals receive support at the right time in the right service. So for us, I feel incredibly proud of what they've achieved in this service.
Excellent. Well, that's great to hear. It's early yet, but any idea of sort of numbers at the moment, or are the numbers what we projected, or is it more?
We've received over 5,000 calls since we've gone live in this service. I think it's probably what we anticipated at this stage. We have a national Adastra system where we can monitor the calls geographically,
yes.
And also we monitor where we're signposting the calls to. So that will support our development now of our core services in mental health, and also the work we need to do with our statutory, with our partners, really, on how we support each other.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. Well, can you pass on our thanks to everybody for everything that's been achieved so far in establishing the service, and we know how important it is, and certainly those numbers and what's been shared with us this morning reflects the significance of the service. Wednesday, which I think is the day after tomorrow,
Yes.
the Deputy Minister, Lynn Eagle, will be visiting, and I'll be joining her as well. So it'll be great to be able to show the Deputy Minister the developments in Wrexham. So I look forward to that. Diolch yn fawr iawn unwaith eto am y stori ragorol.
Thank you very much once again for that excellent story you shared today. Any further questions?
Is the service available for under 18 as well, or is it just over 18?
Yeah, it's all age.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And then the second question was, how does it connect with the ICANN hubs? Because of course they're the kind of face-to-face coming off the street if you need help and support and advice. So have we got, I've kind of lost touch, have we got a really good network of ICANN now?
Yeah,
across North Wales?
We have pathways into all third sector and statutory services. That includes ICANN. So any individual that comes through that will benefit from ICANN are signposted. They may be referred or signposted into ICANN.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the final one was just, there was the announcement, it was on the BBC News last week, wasn't it, from the police around, it was heavily focused on England around the change to police officers feeling that they spend a lot of their time supporting people who might be in mental health crisis. So presumably the work we've done in Wales has meant that we're kind of really geared up for that change. So I guess it was just to understand how that joint work with the police is going.
Diolch, and I commit and I'll take that one if
Okay.
I may. We're working multi-agency on some crisis regional work. So the new approach in England is called Right Care, Right Person. And that one applies to England and Wales. So from our perspective, we've already started the conversations through our regional crisis care concordat group, which Ian kindly chairs. But it links nicely with this programme of work, but it is about working together differently. I believe there's a meeting beginning of August, something like the 9th of August, for our team members with police, with some other colleagues, to talk through how it will work. So we're supportive of anything that kind of works in that early intervention prevention space. And that's what we're seeing. And as Becky was answering on ICANN, I do think that there's an opportunity for us as a board to look again at all our programmes and see what works. But I think we're going to need different approaches for different people, and it'll be getting the blend right, I think, going forward. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Mae gennym ni Rhian.
Thank you. Rhian now wants to come in, I think. So, Rhian, joining us from, is it Pembrokeshire or South Ceredigion?
Sir Benfro, diolch yn fawr.
Pembrokeshire, thank you very much. And apologies that I can't be with you today.
I did, in fact, put my hand back down because Claire made the point that I was going to make about how the context of possibly the police taking less part in assisting with mental health crises. So I think it's already been covered, but I think, so it's good that we're ahead of the curve, as it were, on that, but we may in the future need to be thinking about expanding the service or providing sort of similar provision in a slightly different way. So thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn iawn, Rhian.
Thank you, Rhian.
Nesa, unrhyw un arall sy'n isio only question in sylw, just newch chi ddangos gwch na. Carol.
Anybody else, if you could show me want to
Thank
ask
you
a
very much,
question.
Teresa.
Carol, then.
Thanks, Becky, and the whole team, because in a previous life, I was involved with the Police and Crime Commissioner in South Wales, actually, as a result of the pressure that the police were feeling, that they were being the first responders, not necessarily to mental health situations, but certainly emotional distress, which is a very broad spectrum, and they felt ill-equipped to be able to respond. And so it's really good to see that this is now national, but in particular that it's 24/7 in North Wales, because it is at those times of night, you know, that people will need the support. My question really was about staff support. So it's a pretty tough job, I can imagine, being at the end of the phone for people who are facing difficulties. So what preparation and support are we giving to staff for that role, Becky?
Yeah, so it's quite vast really in this service, as we do with all our core services, but there's a very in-depth induction package, training package for the staff. The wellbeing practitioners are non-registrant staff, supported very closely by registrants. They have peer support. We've got psychological therapy support. They've all got a mentor each, and all calls are audited, and there's a qualified staff member on hand to support and link in with any calls where they may need some additional support, as they're offering advice and assistance and intervention, psychological intervention on the telephone.
Yeah, great. So thank you. Thanks, Becky. Thanks.
Goed iawn. Dyfed, ti'n nesaf?
Diolch. Dwi'n meddwl un o'r pethau sy'n ni gyd
I
yn
think that one of the things we'd all agree on about this service is that it saves people from going to the emergency department. I think that that's a key thing in this service, that we can reduce the pressure. Maybe I'm asking this a bit prematurely, but have we got any kind of data yet to show the effect of what we're seeing with regards to a reduction in the number of people presenting at A&E?
In admissions to the emergency department? Yes, we do have data and early indications, because all calls are triaged and categorised ABC. So the A's and B's are generally police departments or attendance at ED. There is a 20% reduction in lots of cases of patients who ordinarily may have attended ED but have received a telephone call, some psychological intervention, and then not required to go to ED. There are still cases, if there's imminent risk of harm, where people do need to go to ED or police colleagues may be contacted.
Diolch.
Iawn, Teresa?
Diolch, Becky.
Thank you. And to reiterate what Becky said, I think there's an opportunity for us moving forward to look again at, do we have the potential to do more in this field? Again, in order to have a better impact at the front door, whether it's initial care or urgent cases. I think there's an opportunity to hear, as we understand it more, to stream patients to the right place. With regards to data, Becky and the team's data will feed into national data as well. So we will be learning, not just locally, but nationally, about what's improving things and what's having a positive effect. So I think in about another 6 months, when a year will have gone, we will have local data, we'll have national data, and hopefully together they can give you a right picture. Yes, that point is important, that we need to give sufficient time to the service before we come to any conclusions. But I think that this service will grow and develop because of demand. I think we're all aware of the need now, and the service will definitely be developing, but let's give it enough time and not put too much pressure on data at the moment, but at the right time. Any other questions or comments? If not, then thank you very much for coming this morning and sharing your experiences. And I'd like to thank those that have spoken about their experiences as well. That's been really valuable for us. And we wish you well and look forward to see you again on Wednesday. So on we go then to the next item, which is 1.6 and the chair's report, and then the chief executive's report afterwards. There's a copy of these reports in your pack. So I just want to emphasize one or two things from my point of view that it's worth noting. First of all, I'm continuing with visits across the board's area, and I really enjoy doing that because I'm learning a lot. I get a chance to speak to people and to listen. And I really appreciate the fact that people are welcoming and willing to have their say very often. And that's something that I welcome. It's not in my report, but last week I was in Dolgellau and Tywyn, for example, and I spoke to people and I had great benefit from that visit. So I'm going to continue with this pattern, I hope, over the next few months. One or two other things to stress. Carol and I went to the Synedd in Cardiff some time ago, and we went to a closed session of one of the committees, but also in the evening, we had already arranged to do a presentation for elected members in the Synedd on our work around special measures. So it was a very good opportunity to have everyone together. There was a good representation of members of the Synedd, and Carol gave a presentation on the progress we've made into special measures and what needs to be achieved. And then we had questions, and we had that dialogue going with elected members that we thought was important. And we hope to follow that up sometime, maybe in the autumn, with a second presentation to show the progress and the work ahead of us. And I think that members appreciated that. The last point is to do with recruitment for the board. The government has moved to a new appointment system for independent members and a vice chair through public appointments. Those adverts are live now as we speak, and they're on the Welsh Government website. We're still waiting for confirmation from the regulator and the trades unions, and that's going on at the moment. We might hear before long, I hope, and hopefully by the next board meeting, we will have a member of the representative joining with us from the trades unions. I will finish there and invite any questions or comments before we turn to Carol. Gareth.
Well, first of all, just want to say that, because I don't think people say it enough, but we all appreciate how much work you put in. And I think you're absolutely right. Those two priorities of getting around the estate, meeting people, and clearly the important political work. So thanks, David. Just a quick question. Obviously, we've seen now the adverts for the new IM posts. Do we know when the remaining ones will be advertised? And in particular, the thing I think was quite important is that that some of them are not advertised for the full 4 years. I think it would be a shame if all the independent members, because of the circumstances of the last year, sort of come to the end of their term at the same time. So perhaps one solution, I don't know, the Welsh Government's thinking about this, would be to advertise some posts just for 2 years and the rest for 4. But just a question.
Yeah, I think that has been one of the considerations when discussions with government officials, and I think we would encourage them to do that. Also based on the experience we've had in the months we've served. And I think the next campaign, as it were, advertising will be before the end of the calendar year anyway. That's what I understand. But we'll be in discussions with government officials of that.
Any further questions?
I was going to say something similar to Gareth Chair about all of the visits you've been doing. It's kind of eye-watering, and I suppose it was really just to offer that I think others of us on the board table would really welcome starting to do some of that as well. Just because it's one thing, isn't it, sitting in board meetings or committee meetings, and it's another thing to actually be out on site meeting staff and patients. So perhaps we could pick that up in terms of how we might perhaps get something in place into the autumn.
Yes, definitely. And that's been something I think we have been considering and doing it in a planned way. So we don't all land on someone at the same time. But someone was suggesting, for example, recently for us to visit Abergele, where there's some very good things happening. and that would be a good opportunity for us to have an insight. So yes, we'll think of maybe a programme of visits and plan that with you as I am.
I'd just come in on that, please. We've been working with the patient experience team. There used to be a programme of visits, and we're just refreshing that at the moment with a proposal going to be coming around how we're going to be doing it and the way it's going to be managed. So that will be, that is in the pipeline already.
Okay, great. Mike.
Yeah, Chair. Just to say thank you to you and Carol for attending the GMC visit in connection with the North Wales Medical School approval. We gained that approval. They did comment on the closeness of the relationship between the project team across both Bangor University and Betsy Cadwallader. It appears in the written summary we received. So a big thank you. We will be recruiting our first medical students for the North Wales Medical School in September 2024. So just a big thank you. I know it's in your report as well. Thank you very much, Joel and Fat.
Mike. Yes, and it was a pleasure to be there and be part of that day. And I was quite pleased also this morning listening to the news headlines, which is not something you can say often. But at your company this morning, 7 o'clock, there was the story about the medical school and recruiting for students to start in, just over 12 months' time. So that brought it alive, really, and fantastic development. Really excited about that. So, thank you. We're not asking your question, Silo.
I
just want to make a comment. I have visited several departments and various areas of the board, and really fascinated by the passion of people for their work and the welcome I was given as an independent member of the board, taking time to go and visit them and to discuss with them and to listen to what they've got to say. And as you say, people are very open, and if there are concerns, they will share them. And I think that's really important for us as a board as we move forward, so that we do this kind of thing. And I'm very lucky that I've got the time to do so, but I do intend to continue with the visits and possibly even revisit some of the ones I've seen already. But it definitely has an effect. I think, as you say, people appreciate seeing that the board takes an interest in them. Yes, it is important. And people do appreciate. Because while we're sitting in meetings like this one today, which is of course very important, our staff are just working, looking after patients. And it's important that we recognize that and support them by visiting them and talking to them. So thank you for that point. If there's nothing else, are we happy to accept that report? So we'll go on then to the next item, 1.7, and the report of Carol as Chief Executive.
Jeff, thanks very much indeed. I think there's a bit of a theme here. I'm starting my report with the service visits that I've undertaken, and I absolutely concur with the comments that have been made. They're really energising visits, hearing all sorts of different perspectives on what's going well, what's challenging, etc. But really the key impression that I've been gaining from every single visit is the motivation of staff, our managers, our clinical leaders to improve services. So really very energising indeed. In fact, I bumped into David in one of my canteen chats. So I go to the canteen at lunchtime to chat to people. And it was good to see you there, David. I also had the opportunity to speak to medical students, Mike, who were telling me about what they felt this was a hidden gem in terms of the experience that they have had. And so the news of the medical school, I think, will mean that gets much more profile now. And so that's excellent. So I have just done a brief overview of the visits that I have undertaken as really a major first round. And I'm very keen to spend more time with colleagues in mental health services, although I have visited in the West, but also in community and in primary care. Because, you know, we have to be careful that we're not just overly focusing on hospital-based care, and it's obviously easy to go and visit those areas. But I want to, through this meeting, thank staff who gave me their time and their sort of energy and commitment in sharing with me their experiences and the areas that they're really proud of. We will cover some of the work, such as orthopaedics, a little bit later on in the performance report, but I'm certainly seeing some really positive signs moving forward. I also got, as I wanted to hear, some of the real challenges. And it's important that we're taking those back. So some of the challenges around records and single records. And of course, that we will be covering some of that in our special measures report. There's an action in there, but also challenges around the whole pathway, being able to support people back to their homes and to prevent admissions wherever we can. So these are the very real issues that staff are dealing with. A lot of engagement and partnership working through the last 2 months, and it was a highlight just before I went on leave to go to the GMC session. So that's just going to be such a positive development for the region. The other one thing I just wanted to, or two things finally, one is about leadership development. Was really pleased to support the Klein programme that was based in Bangor University for the final session. There is a typo in my report. We're not going to establish a leadership aluminium. It's a leadership alumni. There we are, also correct for you. And really, really positive development, because we have really some very strong leadership, clinical and non-clinical leadership in the organisation, and how we grow that, nurture that and utilise that is going to be key. And then finally, you will see on the Engage to Change, the last part, that the work that's already been happening in the organisation to support people into employment and developing opportunities for them has been recognised, and the Health Board has received 3 Engage to Change awards. So something positive to end my report on. So diolch yn fawr.
Carol.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions or comments? Thank you for that comprehensive report.
Yeah, I was really pleased to see the Engage to Change outcomes and the awards. I just wondered whether we had any stats around the numbers that have been through the programme, and also whether we were doing anything to celebrate that from a public relations perspective, that would be the real story. That was, you know, was bringing people into employment and supporting growth within the region. But, you know, we should be doing something to celebrate that.
Yeah, I can. I can't give you exact numbers. I'm going back to my notes here, because I had a session with Jason and with Nia Thomas, who leads and helps to coordinate this. Of the people that we've been supporting, over half are now employed with us. Others are thinking about their next steps, and an opportunity for that to be publicised to demonstrate the opportunities that are available in the Health Board. So I don't know, Chair, if you mind if I just ask Jason to comment on
Certainly.
That. Thank you, Karen. We had a celebration with the intern and their families about 3 weeks ago, along with our colleagues within colleague Menai, to provide an opportunity really to talk about the journey that they've gone through as a Health Board. And it was absolutely fantastic at that time for the Health Board to receive those awards. We have got press announcements that have been planned on to communicate those, but also as well our partners as well communicating the possibilities that we can have as being a leading apprentice employer within this arena. So there is communications that is planned, but also as well we've been able to celebrate really importantly with those young people who committed to the programme. Each programme has around about 8 to 9 people on at any level points. And that's to ensure that we've got the right level of targeted support. But it works really well. This was over in Aesthetic Renee. And our operational managers have really supported this, got behind it to make sure that those people get through and are given the opportunity to succeed and to gain employment or to succeed in deciding what they want to do next.
It's fantastic. Well done to everyone.
Thank you. Any other further comments? If not, then I will agree to accept the report with many thanks to Carol for all her work and her commitment during the first 2 months, 8 weeks, I think. Although she's now got a cold, she's still very, very active and busy. On to the next item, which is questions from the public. This is a standard item on our agenda, and there's a chance for the public to ask questions beforehand, and then we provide responses. This time we had over 20 questions, and comprehensive responses have gone back. About 12 pages of answers to these questions. They're all on the website for people to see, the questions and the answers. I'm not going to spend time going through every question now, but I'd just like to maybe summarize the themes of those questions. There were questions from one individual to do with the pandemic and Welsh Government's response to it and the board's response to that time, especially what was called exercise sickness in 2016 and what the government did after that. There are questions about coroner's reports and the evidence that the coroner has been looking at recently. There are questions to do with the number of deaths. And then the next theme is a group of questions from the Tywyn Action Group. I'm very grateful to them for their questions, and there are answers there for them. And of course, one thing that is underlined is the reopening of the minor injuries unit in Tywyn recently, and we were very pleased to be there on the day when it was being reopened. A quiet reopening in order to give them a chance to re-establish, and I'm sure it'll be very busy there. I was also pleased to hear about the developments and the intention to offer a range of services in the area and take advantage, hopefully, of the opportunity to look at the way health services are provided in that area of Meirionydd. As I said, the questions and answers have been read by all members of the board, and they're available for the general public on the website. If I could also say that for those of you who want information about how we work as a board, we're very supportive to sharing any information that the public can have. As I always say, you don't have to wait until the next board meeting if you want to ask any questions. Some people do get in touch with us directly. You can do that any day, any week. And it says on the website how to get in touch. The Chief Executive's email is available and my email, and you're welcome to send your questions to us. And to go one step further than that, if you've got topics with lots of questions, and if you'd like to have a meeting to discuss them, we'd be happy to do that. And that might be better, more efficient really, than lots of emails going back and forth. But the offer is out there anyway, for those who wish to take advantage of that. In the meantime, after I've had the answers today, we'll be sending the answers directly as well to those who asked questions. So that's questions from the public. Are you all happy to approve that item? And as I said, they're available in the public domain, but the people who ask the questions will have a direct reply as well. Thank you. Now we go on to the next item, which is the special measures report. And this, again, is a regular item on our agenda for us as a board. Very important for us to be able to show what's happening, what progress we're making, and what are the issues that need our attention. So, Carol, again, please.
Chair, thank you very much indeed. As the Chair has said, this will be a regular report coming through at our meeting back in May. We shared the approach to the special measures response plan that had been developed and discussed with the Welsh Government, and hence there will be a regular item here at the board in terms of updating on that. I'm going to hand over to Chris in a moment, who very kindly prepared the paper for us. And just to say that we're 2/3 of the way through the first cycle. 90 days seems to go very quickly. So we're at 60 days. As I said, when we were approving the response plan, we have set an ambitious programme of response, and we will be working very hard to deliver on that. Some of these actions will carry through into the second cycle, which we're already starting to prepare now. And we want to be absolutely sure at the end of each cycle, we're very clear on the level of embedding and the impact that our actions are having. Chris, I'm sure, will just say a little bit more about the reviews, because the first cycle has meant that there are a number of reviews that are taking place that will give us more insight and intelligence as to where some of the challenges are. And that will indeed help us to form the second 90-day cycle. You will have seen from my Chief Exec report that we held a leadership brief a couple of weeks ago, probably quite a while ago now, thinking about it, but where we were able to engage 500 leaders right the way across the organisation, so that we can really help people to understand the approach, how this works in their day-to-day practice. And I was very pleased with the response that was shown through that event and subsequently. So probably just look to Chris now to give us a little bit more on the detail of this, and then of course happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you, Carol, thank you, Chair. So as Carol said, we're a little over the midway mark now on this first cycle, and I'd like to report that generally we're making some good progress. Actually, the data, I have slightly more updated data than the data in your pack. We've got 51 completed milestones as of this week, or completing this week, which is roughly where we were expecting to be. There are some areas where we're a little further behind than we had anticipated. but those mostly relate to delays in some of the external reviews reporting. And clearly it's difficult to move to the next step of an external review until you actually have the review. Having said that, many of those have arrived in the organisation over the course of the last week or so. And so I'm confident that on most of those areas, we will be able to make up that lost time. There are a lot of external reviews competing for time in this first 90-day cycle. We have 9 external reviews. There were originally going to be 10, but the 10th will not feature as part of cycle 1. And as I say, most of those have been received, at least in draft format, for correction into the organisation now. And so we're moving forward in terms of the next steps across all of those. We're beginning to see some clear, tangible green shoots emerge as a consequence of cycle 1. I do have one correction to make on that page in the slide pack. On the first one, there is a single but important word missing in terms of the planned care 156 week waiters. It should say that there are the 156 week waiters without their first appointment having been booked has now reduced by 21%. And that's a direct consequence of cycle 1. And as you may recall, our commitment was to have eradicated those 156 week waits by the end of cycle 1 in terms of having an appointment booked, and we will have done that. And moving forwards, we've adopted the Good Governance Institute 3 lines of defence for our assurance reporting, and that is progressing well. As I've alluded to, there's an awful lot of work going on in the engine room now in terms of what do the reviews say and how do we move forward against many of those recommendations. And that features very well in terms of moving into the second cycle, which is what we're also spending a lot of time thinking about now. How do we move from the first into the second cycle seamlessly? You'll see in the pack an appendix which runs through very briefly each of the deliverables. There'll be a more tabulated view come to the next board, which has RAG ratings on that. It isn't here today because it needs to work through our committee structure, but that I think will have been to all committees or almost all committees before we next meet as a board. I think I'll stop there, but happy to pick up any questions.
Chris, and it's worth noting that I think most of us present today were part of the meeting with the Minister recently where the progress was presented, and I think it's a fair reflection of the discussions with the Minister that she was encouraged by the progress and obviously was looking for us to continue on the road with that progress. So that was good, and we will welcome her support. Any question? So what questions from anybody on that item, please? Special measures. Claire.
First, just wanted to thank Chris really for the formatting of the report. I find the presentation style really good, simple to understand. Lots of key highlights for each section, just all on one page. So it feels it's the right level for us as well in terms of giving us the kind of strategic oversight. And maybe it's a detailed question that perhaps I don't know if you can answer it, but I was intrigued. I'm intrigued by the really big challenges in orthodontics, and it does come through in a few items on today's agenda. So the 156 waiters, things are progressing really well, except for orthodontics. And so in my experience, when somebody has a problem with their teeth, it usually needs something quite rapid in terms of a response. It's not kind of something that you can kind of plan for into the future. So why is orthodontics so challenging? Is it something about how the contracts are set with dentists in Wales? I don't Because there are lots of private dentists in the region, and lots of dentists are becoming private dentists who were NHS dentists. So I've noticed we're doing a big campaign around some overseas recruitment, but is there just something fundamental about the way the contracts are set up in Wales that makes this a challenge? I can't see what the solution needs to be.
I won't be able to answer all of that question today. But in terms of orthodontics or the numbers and references to orthodontics here, these references are to specialist orthodontics, the really complex orthodontics, not the comparatively simple orthodontics, which actually is often not provided on the NHS anymore. So these are specialist orthodontic providers, and they have a separate contract to the normal dental contract. There has, for as many years as I can think, been a shortfall in terms of orthodontic providers in North Wales. I can't tell you today specifically where we are in terms of, previously, but I think the reason the data here excludes orthodontics is because they're excluded from the national metric on this.
Right.
However, I will go away and double check, and I'll come back formally to confirm that with you.
Carol and Gareth.
Yeah, just a footnote to what Chris has said. I think we had a problem with orthodontics before the pandemic. The pandemic's made a lot of work. Okay. And now there's a lot of catch up to be done. I think there's some potential in terms of thinking about the type of work, as Chris said, are we getting the specialist work to the right place, or are we, are we not quite getting that right? I think the wider primary care offer, we need to make sure that we've got that, and then we can really focus on how do we procure the appropriate more specialist element. I know from my role in Paris, it was a challenge there as well. So it's a collective issue that we're going to need to make progress on. I think this one, not to set ourselves up for too much of a challenge, I think this is an important marker for us to be able to make progress on this, because it really does stick out as a poor access service. I think when people get to the service, it's pretty good, but they're waiting a long time. Yeah.
Well, Gareth.
Just a couple of points. Mostly, well, first of all, to echo what Claire said, I thought the report generally was very clear. But I was a little bit confused about where the status of the 10 reviews. So you said one has been dropped, and perhaps just for the record, you could tell us which one that one was, and whether it's been dropped entirely or just been dropped from the first cycle. The other thing was that I think you said on the first slide in the pack, I think it said that they were on track to commence, and it's clearly that they're more than that. That you said several of them have already provided draft reports, but I was a bit confused with the more detailed slides where quite a few of them referred to, like, the portfolios review was finalised in terms of reference, or they've developed a methodology. So I wasn't clear. So perhaps just a quick statement of those 10, how many we're expecting more or less finalised reports by the end of this coming month. And then there's a small point, but nevertheless important, I think, on the detailed slide about independent members started induction. And I don't think it's being unfair to say that, and understandably, given the crisis the board was in, that when we joined the board, there wasn't much in the way of induction, and it's probably a bit late to retrofit that now. But with the opportunity of the new board members being recruited now, I think we need to make sure they have a much more structured introduction to the health board.
Okay. Thanks. So on the first question, to Carol and the reviews, and Carol and Chris, just give us the latest situation, please. Then we'll answer the question regarding induction.
Great. Recognising I'm my first day back from annual leave today, so I'm going to just check that I'm getting this right. Chris will help me out here. So I think we've had a number of reviews in draft. We've had one finalised, which is the interims review. A number are in draft. The one that is, and we've got some that are underway. So the ones that are underway are planning or the executive portfolio review is underway. We've had interims, the officer board and secretaries of governance review. We've had the patient safety review in. Now that was delayed, and that's had a knock-on effect of the clinical governance review, which means that will go into the next quarter.
One.
Yeah, so I think they're either in draft, underway, and that's just that one that will go into the next cycle. Chris, can I just ask you to correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, that is right. We're expecting that 5 of the 9 will clearly report in final version in this cycle, because we have now confirmed any matters of correction. So they should arrive in final version at any point. The clinical governance systems one won't start this cycle, and the remaining reviews have all started, but will not have commenced by the end of the cycle. That's great, thank you.
May I come back just on one thing, and that's that some people have asked me, will we be publishing the findings? And so, hence to stress the status of this report and being clear that people will be able to see the findings and the recommendations once they've been through all of the relevant committees.
Yeah. Phil, do you want to say something about induction and after the Gareth raised?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gareth. Yes, I absolutely recognise that there's a very functional induction link for the IMs at the moment, and that the focus of this special measures work is we've been garnering the best practice across the health boards in Wales and other agencies in Wales, putting together a kind of a menu of what really a good induction pack looks like. And to your point, I think it does need to choreograph with not just with you're here now, but also with the arrival of new independent members. So thank you for raising that. I recognise the issue.
Diolch yn iawn. Unrhyw sylw, unrhyw gwestiwn arall ar yr adroddiad yma, adroddiad mesur arbennig, sydd adroddiad pwysig iawn.
Any further questions on this very important report? Claire?
Sorry, I should have said this earlier, but it was. I think it does need to be said that it's just fantastic to see that we've had no never events. Having been an associate member in the past and seen some of the reporting that's come to board, so I really welcome that. It's really great progress, well done. And also the improvement in orthopaedics, not for now really because we're in the board meeting, but I'd really like to understand a bit more about the pilot we've been undertaking in Wrexham. Really, it's to get the number of days people in hospital down from 4.1 to 2.3. It's fantastic, and if we can roll that kind of practice out right across the region and in other specialties, that would be brilliant. So perhaps for another time, maybe it's in a board away session just to understand what's changed, what we're doing differently, and how we think that's applicable elsewhere.
That's a good point, and there are good things happening across the organisation, some of which is highlighted in this report, and that's because people are putting in tremendous effort, and we're really grateful for everything that's happening. And I think that it is interesting that people are taking some innovative approaches, new approaches that then produce improved results. And that is the learning from that, I think, is important that we take across the whole organisation. And that's something I think it would be interesting for us to hear as well, as you say. So we're really grateful for the progress that has been made. And if I can encourage us as a board to say thank you to everyone, but also let's sustain it. Let's sustain that improvement so that we're building on it as we progress. So, diolch yn iawn. Rhian, ti sy'n dod mewn eto? Sorry, dwi'n gweiddi fel bod ti'n beth ond ti ddim yn gwneud beth. Ti'n beth bod ond ti'n clywed mi'n iawn, ond...
Apologising for shouting, as it were.
I just wanted to reinforce really what's just been said. There's startling signs of progress being made, and that is really good news. It's the matter of maintaining that momentum and not suffering special measures fatigue, I think, is going to be quite important to keep everything going. But the other point I just wanted to make very briefly is just to note, of course, that special measures reports are also being presented to committees, which are overseeing work in certain of the deliverables. So I just wanted that to be noted, that work is going on outside the actual board, but that committees are involved as well.
And that's a very important point in terms of the ability of committees to receive progress reports and to get into some of the detail. So that link between the special measures work that is happening and where it reports to exec team and so on also comes to committee and then comes to board. So there will be, I hope, an opportunity as we progress. Committees will, in their reports, maybe wish to highlight some of the issues that are raised when they look at some of the detail. I think that would be a good thing to do. Mike.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Claire's comments, obviously this is not the meeting to go into detail about perfect month, but it's figured in 3 reports so far in this meeting. It would be nice to have some more detail, but I just one question just to probe a little bit more. Do we have plans to try and replicate that success in other services and other sites?
Yeah, that's a good question and a good challenge for us, I think. So, Carol.
Yeah, just briefly on that, I think having visited all of the 3 main orthopaedic sites, and I'll come to Abigail in a moment, each area is really focused on improving that sort of productivity. They're doing it slightly different ways, but there are some core elements. Protecting the bed base is really, really key. So what we mean by that is ensuring that people who are on the urgent and emergency pathway are supported without having to go into orthopaedic wards. That means that the throughput gets momentum. The other thing that the teams across the board have been doing is implementing more of the GIRFT. GIRFT is getting it right first time. And we've seen the number of operations on a list go up consistently. And that is improving, just talk about teaching earlier, improving the quality of teaching as well. And I heard from one of the doctors in training about how beneficial that is. So I think there is more, and I think it would be great to hear the development story actually here on orthopedics, because it is affecting so many of the population of the region. But for people to see the progress that is being made and what's being done. But I was really heartened by my visit. Staff are so proud of what they've been able to deliver. So I think if we can cultivate that more and recognise that as a board, that'd be great.
Any other question? Oh, okay. Felly ydyn ni'n hapus I dderbyn.
So are we happy to approve the report then? And the progress and the special measures. Thanking everyone for the work, and thank you to Chris and team for putting those reports together in a very effective way, as people have said. Okay, if you're all happy then, thank you. Now we go on to the next item, which is our annual plan. Something that we've seen before, and there's a chance for us now to have a report on it once again. And Chris is taking us through it.
Thank you, Chair. So the colleagues will remember that we discussed essentially the document in front of you at our last board meeting. We made some small changes as a consequence of that meeting. And had some touch points with most colleagues around the table following that. And I can confirm that we did submit the plan to Welsh Government in time for the deadline that had been agreed. The plan that you see in front of you is ambitious, but I believe realistic. I recall considerable conversation about the number of strategy references within it, and we talked about the many external but also internal drivers. And I can report today that we've spent a lot of time since that meeting discussing some of those internal drivers and some of the things that we can do in terms of moving that forward. as we progress now in preparing for next year's plan, which of course is now underway. We're monitoring the progress against this plan, and that monitoring is already underway. We'll be taking a similar approach to the monitoring we've just discussed for special measures. I'm very grateful for the feedback on that report. So those monitoring reports will go through committees in a similar format, and then through to boards in an aggregated format. So I think I'll stop there, but very happy, of course, to pick up questions.
Good morning, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions or anybody want to add anything?
Just to echo Chris's comments, that in places the plan is challenging, but what has really encouraged me as I walk around the different departments is the IHC directors, the teams knowing what that challenge is and thinking about how they can actually do something about it. Because a plan, which is just a plan on the paper, is of little value, but a plan that is owned by the organisation and leading to change, it gives me some optimism, and that's tangibly different this year.
No, so what the question now?
Any more questions or comments?
Gareth?
It's a question really about comparability around performance targets between ourselves and the rest of Wales. So I'm particularly looking at the Welsh Government targets around 52 weeks and 36 weeks. And obviously we've got projections that show we are going to improve in terms of our performance over the next year, but I'm assuming we've set something really realistic by not saying we think we can hit those targets and be down to zero. But how does our trajectories and our expectations compare with other health boards across Wales? Because that's important, isn't it? Yes, it's going to move in the right direction, but are other health boards going to hit those targets that Welsh Government have set?
Yes, I'm not quite sure how to respond to that, because I think that, I mean, it's clearly, it's a really important point, and there is lots of data out there which does allow us to benchmark, and it features a little bit in some of the performance reporting, but actually could feature much further. So I'm just kind of sat here really thinking about how to best do that. And to try and avoid responding to very specific examples in here, because there are so many that I could refer to that this wouldn't be the right forum. I think as an overall, I'd say that in terms of some of the metrics that are shown specifically within the report in front of you, we are an outlier on some of those areas. We do have more long waiters than many areas of Wales. But that's by no means general across all of them. And in many, we are well within the same territories as other organisations, allowing for size, of course. I can provide more specific data outside of today's meeting, but I think I would take an action away really on how, in our performance reporting, how we bring in some of that benchmarking data a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is just because those two are specifically a Welsh Government target that it's expected to be at zero. That's why I was focusing on those two in particular, really.
Thanks for that. There is quite a big grid available with the data of every health board in every situation. I know that because the minister carries it around with her. and she helpfully refers to it when she has meetings with me. So that is available. And I think I shared something similar to that some time ago, which was quite interesting, actually, put this in the context. But before bringing other in that, Carol, just a bit about the benchmarking generally, and how are we going to deal with that as sort of knowing where we are, as it were, in terms of performance?
Yeah, great. The straight answer is, I think most, if not all, health boards are struggling on a couple of the key areas. The planned care is a real challenge, and urgent emergency care is a real challenge. So I think we're all in some difficult circumstances on meeting fully the minister's expectations. And of course, because we're 22% of the population of Wales, you know, our performance really does does make a difference. On the general performance, we're working on a new performance framework for the organisation. I'm very keen on benchmarking, not just about access performance, so how long does it take for somebody to get to a service, but on the quality performance, on workforce performance, on financial performance, etc. So we see it in the round. And in order to benchmark that, both in Wales, but also to think much more about the outcomes. So if we think about cancer, for example, what are the outcomes for people who have certain types of cancer in North Wales compared to the best in Europe? You know, and I think we've got to think a bit more broadly than just Wales when we're trying to set our ambition.
Carol, I think that point about benchmarking is really important, but also, you know, let's be driven by the best in class, wherever that is, whether it's Scandinavia or whether it's Milton Keynes or whatever. You know, that's our ambition, best in class, and take the learning from it and use it for benchmarking. Gareth, then Karen.
Well, just to come in on that point as well, I mean, as Carol knows, I'm very keen on benchmarking, and I agree that we need a more wide framework, but also just positioning ourselves in Wales is really important. And just to pick up what you said, Chair, that, you know, my understanding from the data that I have seen, which is obviously not particularly comprehensive, but through the committee that I chair, is that what's interesting is that, you know, reading some of the coverage, you'd think that Betsy was always at the bottom, but actually it's a pretty mixed picture. It's not all good, but some of the things that we are doing worse than the rest of Wales on are some of the most visible things, particularly long waits. So that, to an extent, is what draws the attention to us. But, you know, there are quite a lot of things where we compare at least as well across the help us. I just wanted to, I mean, Chris very kindly picked it up in his introduction. First of all, I wanted to say I was very grateful when we met last that I think some of us were uncomfortable about the annual report going in without us having had the opportunity to see the full text. And although this is the first time this has been put in the public agenda, just to record that we were able to do it, I'm extremely grateful to Chris and his colleagues for giving us that opportunity. The other point which Chris did refer to was this question about my concern about, you know, the sheer sort of number of strategies and plans that we've got to work on. And I think we in submitting this annual plan, we tried to strike the right balance between financial performance and activities. I'm sure we're going to discuss this later, but it didn't take a genius to work out that was going to come under pressure from the Minister of the Welsh Government. So, you know, we will need to look at this again. I'm sure you're already doing it, but just to make that point that, you know, we need, unfortunately, a list of things that we think are less urgent priorities for us to do if we're going to meet the ambitions of the Welsh Government in terms of our financial performance.
Agreed. Gareth, Karen.
My question relates around the child and adult mental health service, particularly. And it was going to pick up some of the stuff that's already been mentioned around, is this a national problem? How bad are we doing? How are we looking at good practice elsewhere to try and improve the position? And I think just thinking about sort of healthcare in the future, if we're not supporting young people adequately now when they're young, then the consequences of that as they get older into schooling, academic achievement, we'll have this cycle of, you know, not being the best that they can be because they've been let down at an earlier stage. So I think it's very, very important that we look as hard as we can to try and improve this, because well-being of future generations, as the Act was written, you know, we've got to support our young people, because they'll just be even more burdened on the health service down the line today.
That's a really good point, that whilst we are really putting lots of time and energy around things that are in the annual plan that are asked from the government and around special measures, that work on early intervention actually is crucial. And if we don't invest in that, then, as you've said, there will be consequences further down the line. So that's something that we really need to focus on as well. Would anybody wish to respond to Karen's point, particularly around mental health? Teresa.
Diolch. O ran yr gwaith
With regard to the neurodevelopment work in particular, I know that there are challenges right across Wales. It's not just Betsi Cadwaladr. What I'd like to talk about is the good work that we are doing at the beginning of life. We call it Start in Life as part of the plan. And that's not work we're doing on our own as a health board. That's regional work across North Wales. I'm sure you've heard about the No Wrong Door scheme. It's No Wrong Door, it's called the Right Door in North Wales because of the voice of young people. Karen is quite right. We've got to try and break the cycle. Intervening early, working with parents, that's very important, and also working with partners, such as our partners in education and so on, so that we get the dialogue completely, but also with neurodevelopment. I think, if I remember correctly, that this is a challenge across all of Wales. Anybody else? I think just a comment. Looking at the challenges with the targets, yes, hitting the target is one thing, but making sure it's sustainable is something else. I was reading recently about hitting the target, and it talks about hitting the target but missing the point. And I think we need to put all of these in their context and make sure they're sustainable for the future. Otherwise, we're coming back to the same cycle all over again. Yes, an excellent point about targets. They are important, but the biggest measure is the public's experience of our services. And the public will let us know where we're at and how we're performing. And that's as important as any target.
Over to you next. Thanks, Chair. I noticed there's a strand of staffing, particularly on mental health, there's a strand of not having adequate staffing. Just to draw the board's attention to, Betsy had a stand at the Royal College of Psychiatrists annual scientific conference in Liverpool 2 weeks ago. I just thought my medical students told me they were kind of influenced by that as well. They would like to work as psychiatrists when they graduate. These are Cardiff students at the moment. So really just to commend that action that the mental health team were represented at the conference. It's I think probably something we should be doing more of. It's not the only specialty we need to recruit in.
No, that's a good point, isn't it? In the terms of how we get out there and how we can target particular audiences, as it were. So yeah.
Anything else?
Na, felly, os nad oes unrhyw bwynt arall, gawn ni ddiolch.
If not, then thank you for the work. And I think the recommendation is that we note that the plan in this form will be reviewed by the government again, and there might be questions going back and forth, and there'll be a chance for us as a board, if needed, to have a further input into this. Otherwise, are you all happy to accept the report? And thank you once again for this important work. On we go then to item 2.3, which is the corporate governance section. And there are a number of reports here, and I'm going to ask Phil to go through them.
And there'll be an opportunity for any questions as we go along.
So this is a new format for providing a report on corporate governance matters. So trying to draw out what's significant each time we come to the board, and this time we've got 4 areas within the report. Risk register, the response to Audit Wales report on board effectiveness, COVID-19 inquiry update, and chairs, and a routine item on chairs action and common seal. So consequently, it's a big report. So I will pause as the chair asks after each one, really, to then move on. Otherwise, it's a long introduction from me. So the first of those is the corporate risk register, And the purpose of the paper is to provide you with an oversight of the corporate risks that have been assessed through the Health Board's risk management group in June. But the report, I think, as importantly, really, the report also describes the improvements that have been made, have started to be made and continue to be made to improve the way we report risk. So the report notes there's further work to be done on that, and goes into some detail about how we're going to do that. I think it's really important to know that within that we are looking to agree a new risk management framework to be approved at the next board meeting we have the next full board meeting we have in September. So there's a lot of work for us all to do as a board around risk management to gain agreements. Actually, it's some of the basic things that we want to establish together as a relatively new board. So I think that's how I'd introduce the paper. I know that you've had a chance to read it and contribute to it. So thank you for that.
Diolch. Unrhyw questionnaire, I'll bring Karen first, then Claire, and as Phil said, this was shared and people did contribute to it and raise questions before bringing it to board in this format. So that was really helpful. But Carol to begin with, then Claire, then Gareth.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just want to underline the commitment and the impending deadline, actually, of getting that risk management framework done. We really can't have a position, I think I've shared this before, my perspective on this, where we've got, upwards of 50 odd corporate risks. We really need to be able to, at this board level, be very clear about where the big risks are and how we are mitigating those. I think, of course, people risk manage on a day-to-day basis in clinical practice all of the time. But I think if we can make some of our systems and processes more streamlined and simplified, they were some of the messages that I heard when I was out and about. I think this is a great opportunity to do that, so that we start to demystify this for people in the organisation. But yeah, I wanted to emphasise what Phil has said about getting this framework developed and over the line at the next meeting.
Good on. Claire, then Gareth.
Diolch. I like the single page in the appendix, the kind of red, amber, green shading. I do like that, thank you, because it makes it very easy to see where we should be focusing our attention. I'm confused, I think, about what the difference is between the corporate risk register and what everyone keeps calling BAF. So take what I'm about to say in that context. Yes. So when I look at this still, I think it's too operational for the board to be considering. And when I've looked at the headings, many of them could be grouped together. So, for example, I think the board should look at patient safety. And then beneath patient safety, there'll be a number of operational risks that different parts of the organisation are working on. So I think this is a good step forward, but I think there's still more for us to do to kind of, there's a number in here that are all about asbestos. Well, actually, and other things to do with buildings, we should have one around compliance. Are we meeting all of the health and safety legislation with our buildings? And then actually, the detail in the report would report to us on which bits of compliance we're okay with and which bits we've got work to do with risk. I think one of the ones that's missing from here is something around culture, but you might tell me that's meant to be in the back, but I need to understand more what the difference between the two is. But personally, I think that if we can deliver the right organisational culture, many of the things that are currently risks wouldn't be risks. So for me, it's a kind of fundamental at a strategic level that we, first of all, agree what it is, our purpose, what the culture is that we're wanting to develop and create. And then I think some of the things that we kind of talk about a lot, like patient records, like issues around behaviours, or would all just follow through, really. So I guess what I'm saying, it is progress, Phil. Thank you very much. That one page where you just immediately can see, and of course, what that says is there's far too many in the reds and the oranges, and not enough in the greens. So I think that format's great, but I think we've got more work to do on.
Thank you, and I will come back to you at the end on this.
Great. So I'll bring Gareth a wedyn Rhian.
Yeah, well, I wanted to echo what Claire said. I think that it's a big step forward. I like the heat map and it's really useful. I think the format of the fiche, as I call it, so I think my continental background, is actually quite useful, although I know there's more work to do on it. Yeah. I mean, it is quite worrying that if you focus on the words that we really think we've got all these risks where there's a catastrophic impact.
Yes,
that's food for real thought. And I'm not saying that's not true, unfortunately, but we just need to focus on that. I mean, I take what Claire says. I suspect I'm struggling more with how you would have a more strategic approach, which would nevertheless was specific. But we need to. I'm sure we're going to explore that sort of as a board in a more informal setting. I sort of thought. I think I said slight hair running where I said I thought it was important that we saw all the ones where there was a likelihood of 5, but I think we ought to probably see, particularly if we can slim them down to more important ones, so anything that scores 15 above, regardless of whether it's a 5 or not, in terms of its likelihood. And there is the question, which I think Claire's brought up at previous occasions, about what it might be Claire or Karen or both of you, about what is an issue and what is a risk. In a way, if a risk is crystallised, it is an issue. It's something that we're coping with, not as a risk. And there are quite a few of these, I think, which I think I've noticed outside the meeting, which I think we need to just reflect a little bit on that. And in terms of things that I felt were missing, the risk could be very controversial. I think there's the risk about the new organisational structure, as we still call it, the new operating model. But I think there's a related risk about whether we've addressed the structure at the centre appropriately to cope with that, because having not had the full induction, my sense is that there is a real issue there, and I think that should be recognised. I think we should also have on the financial risks, not just the risk about failing to deliver our targets of a £134 million deficit, but there is a risk, which is arguably crystallised an issue, of not meeting our statutory break-even duty. So I think that's something else I would suggest. But as I said, and to echo Claire, I think it's making good progress. We probably need a session to go through in a bit more detail the individual ones. But I very much welcome the fact that there's so much work going into this.
Gyfrewn Gareth. I think Rhian ti nesa a wedyn Karen.
Yeah, thanks. I can just echo Claire and Gareth. It's really good so far. I think what I would like to see is to be able to put it into a context. What is the definition of risk? There's obviously lack of clarity about what is a strategic risk, what is an operational risk, what is an issue, a definition. How are things scored, and how is that understanding of criteria used for scoring made clear throughout the different levels who are doing this? So I think I'd be looking to put, this is the second half of the story. I think I'd quite like to have the context, the clarity, the definition, the difference between corporate risk and the board assurance framework, etc. I think these things have been picked up already, but I'd like to see risk as a complete package. And I understand that as a board, we'll be looking at it in a less formal setting, so that's all really good. But I think once we can get a bit more clarity and structure around risk, it gives us more of a focus then, doesn't it? It'll help with our prioritising.
Rhian, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Just say, obviously, a lot of work has gone into this, and at the last board meeting, it was agreed that we would try and get something together for the September, which is a challenge in itself. And I think Phil's done a great job to get it this far for us all to be able to make comments on. Yeah. There's a key thing that's missing for me, which Phil and I have discussed, which is the risk of not making the improvements to get out of special measures, which I think need to be in there. And also,
and just picking up on what Rhiann's just said, you know, we don't have a risk appetite yet. We've got a lot of work to do, which is going to come out of the board workshop, which hopefully the things that Rhiann's just flagged will also be more defined and have a more contextualised document to work to going forward. But so far, I think, you know, well done. Let's hope we can make the September deadline. And I don't know whether you mentioned before, but you've now got a head of risk starting, haven't you?
Yes, so we've always had a head of risk management, but I'm glad to say that we've recruited substantively to someone who lives in North Wales as opposed to someone who doesn't. So that's a really welcome step forward, and I'm noticing a change in the way that risk has been brought to life with that. So I'm really pleased. Some of that work is reflected here, so I'll pass that on.
Thank you.
Diolch yn iawn. So I'll bring Jason to Nessa Brimillo.
Thank you, Chair. Just a short comment in relation to what Claire noted around organisation culture. It's just to assure the board really that there is work in progress that we've got planned to bring the board together to start to discuss our organisational culture and the programme that we'll then take throughout the organisation. So it's just a point to note really that culture is absolutely key, and we recognise that influences so many aspects, particularly delivery of safe and effective care. But we do have a programme, and that will come into board at a set point over the next few months.
Thank you, Jason. So quite a lot of comments on that bill. So encourage you maybe not to get into so much of the individual questions, which we need to consider when we continue developing the work. But some of the general, I'll also turn to Carol as well.
Thank you. I'll take that advice. Thank you, Chair. So I think there are some new risks that have been highlighted. Thank you to board members for highlighting those. You know, so what will we do with that? We'll record that. We've got the risk management group coming up in a week and a half or 2 weeks' time, so we can make sure that the risk management group has sight of those observations from the board. Thank you, and there will be a exec risk owner for each of those. In terms of Claire's comments around the clarity, and Rhiann's and other colleagues, we can incorporate this into the workshop that we're going to do. And I've agreed with Karen as the audit chair. He says nervously, just hoping that Karen remembers that we do want to kind of move this work together collaboratively with you. We're not just going to pin our hopes on one board workshop with you. We want to work with you on this throughout the next 6 or 7 weeks. It is quite a tight deadline, and we've got a lot of work to do. But we have made a really good start. So all those comments will be picked up in the work that we do. Okay.
Carol, some comments on this?
Yeah, just to draw a conclusion to this, I agree with all the comments that have been made, actually. And I think if we can get that framework, that will give the context that was mentioned earlier. We'll give the definitions, we'll give the process, we'll give the presentation of the risk, where this fits in terms of the wider organisation. But for us as a board, particularly to be focused on the strategic risks, and I hear the confusion between risk and BAF. We'll sort that. We need to sort that out. So I'm encouraged by the conversation. There's still quite a bit to get done, but we've got a bit between our teeth on this.
It's really useful, that. Thank you. Okay, go on to the next page. Thank you. So the second part of this is the response to the Audit Wales report on board effectiveness. So the reports, I'll take the reports as read. I'll just introduce it briefly. It's a high profile piece of work that's in this report for obvious reasons, really, isn't it? Because it's a report that was critical of the way that we undertook our business. So there are 3 aspects to that. It was made in February this year, the report. That's when it was published. And the reason why we're just providing a response now is because we wanted it to align to the special measures work that you've already heard about. And I was struck when I wrote the report how much of the response we can give to Audit Wales is contained around the approach we've undertaken with special measures. So the format reflects that in terms of how we intend to make this response to Audit Wales. There are 3 key areas. There's the way that the Health Board responds to independent reviews and investigations, rebuilding and strengthening senior leadership capacity, and building a more cohesive board and exec team. So there's a lot of content in the report, so the discussion is probably very useful, but the ask of the board is for us to approve the response so we can reply formally to Audit Wales.
The question is ar adroddiad yna, as Phil said, we are responding to an initial report from colleagues in Audit Wales, and this is the draft response. So, opportunity anybody to make any comment. In terms of Gareth first.
Well, first of all, just to say, I think, as Phil said, this was a really important report, obviously, and had major consequences. But, having been here a few months, I think a lot of it was very well founded in terms of things we talked about culture. I think we've all seen that. So it is important. It's important that we respond to it appropriately. I think this is a good response. I felt that there was more to be said under the heading of the third set of recommendations. So in 1 and 2, there's quite a lot of additional comment, and there isn't the same in the section 3. And particularly, for example, and not trying to sort of put ourselves on the back, but the stuff about the culture of the board and the board meetings. I think we should be being a bit more forthright about the changes that have been introduced since the report. So I'm quite happy to approve it, but again, I would like that just to be looked at, and perhaps under and your authority just to sort of add a little bit more to that. There was then 2 other points. One is a very small point, but there's a point in point 2.1 where it says that the chair will report to the remuneration committee will report on the 17th of June and 17th of July. I think, well, that just reads off, we need to just distracting point. More substantively, and this comes back to the question of the 9 to 10 reviews, I quite understand why when the drafts are received, that we as a board don't get to see them, because obviously points of accuracy need to be picked up by the relevant executive directors. But I do think I'm a bit uncomfortable, for example, this review of interims, which I think is now complete, that we still haven't seen it. So perhaps just an issue of process really around that.
Okay, I'll bring Karen in then. Carol, respond maybe to that point.
Mine was just a quick comment on the format of the report, really. I think the content is what it is. I think if we're going to monitor it going forward and the progress, we need to sort of perhaps look at what we've done today and what we're planning to do, so that we can see the clear pathway to sort of actually find it a little bit blurry at the moment. But I think through the committees we can look at that.
Okay, thank you very much. Carol, some comments on this?
Yes, thanks very much. Yes, there is this relationship with the special measures plan, and I think we can refine that a little bit more to make it a bit clearer there, Karen. I'm struck by Gareth's comments about actually there's probably a bit more to say under section 3. Maybe we're being a little bit tentative, and I know that this was first developed as a draft report probably about 6-8 weeks or so ago, yes. and so maybe the updates haven't quite caught up. What I did want to say though is that Audit Wales will wish to come and do their review, their follow-up, and I think that would be very welcome. We've had some initial discussion with them about the time frames on that, and likely to be in the autumn as the first part of their routine structured assessment work. So that will be an important test of actually what has happened, into what actions have we taken, as Karen was saying, but also what impact is that having, and does it feel different? Is it different? Is the board effective in its deployment of its duties? So I think we will get a bit of a test on that. So the timing's a bit awkward here, because here we are at the end of July. This report came out in February. We have been sharing iterations with Audit Wales, and then they will use this with some strengthening comments as necessary to check in on how we're progressing in the autumn.
Great, so we can incorporate some of the comments.
But just to be very clear, as I said, I have no problem with approving this as the basis of the report, but of the response. But I think it would be good just to add a few more points.
So if that's okay, Phil, we will look to incorporate some comments and then send the further draft around so that we can all agreed with it to be sent to Audit Wales. Mike, and then we'll close this side.
Yeah, just very quick query. Do we know we have a very clear timeline for special measures responses, obviously. Do we have a timeline on Audit Wales plans to come and visit us, as Carol mentioned? Do we have a deadline to work to? I'm just wondering.
No, if I could just pick that up, what we've been trying to do, and in discussion with Audit Wales, is to ensure that really we're taking this into the special measures plan, and we're seeing that through, because the well-functioning board is outcome one of the special measures response. So trying to reduce the risk of having multiple plans everywhere. Audit Wales have indicated the autumn, which would be at sort of cycle 2, really, like sort of September, October, November. And I would imagine that in that window, Audit Wales may well do their start of their work. So I think that's our working hypothesis at the moment.
Right. So the next report, section 3 is on the UK COVID inquiry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is an update on the health board's kind of role within the UK nationwide COVID-19 inquiry. So there's a little bit of an update around how the modules work generally, and I will kind of hold my hand up and say I don't think I probably adequately explained what module 1 was and module 3. So I'll give a little bit of a flavour of that if that's of interest to the board in a second. I think it's again, it's a significant piece of work for the health board. So we've already had requests for information to come through, and obviously we have a duty, and we're bound to respond to those. And because we have got a relatively new board and some new members of the exec team, some of our information is complex to provide because it requires responses from people who've left the organisation. So it's a big role, it's a big task. I hope this report provides some assurance around the steps we're taking. So we're working very closely with the Welsh Shared Services legal team, and where we require any legal advice to make sure the health board is not compromised in any way, we take it. It's really important. I've got a secondee as a head of COVID inquiry who's joined me for an 18-month secondment, and I anticipate that person being very busy for at least that period of time. This is going to be a significant piece of work. I'm the senior responsible officer for it, but obviously Carol's the accountable officer. So it is important that we take all advice we can with this. So I'll leave it at that, Chair, by way of introduction.
Thank you very much, Phil. Question anybody wish to add anything?
Sorry, me again. Good day. This is, I didn't push this under declaration of interest because it's not really an interest, but I do want to just be on the record that I've been asked to assist the former Counsel General and Brexit Minister, Jeremy Miles, in responding to what they call a Rule 9 request, which is, and I've been told, although I haven't received anything, that I may receive a Rule 9 request, but obviously this is in respect to my previous position, from which I retired in 2021.
Okay, thanks, Kenneth. We will note that for you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the question, others, right? So your final section, Bill, on updates and chair actions.
Thank you. So this is going to be a routine item from now on, which I think is really good practice, which is, have we had any chairs actions? We've got a nil return for that. So where we do have them, we would put them in this report. So this is a nil return, if you like. And then we've had 2 common seal applications, and that's, where we kind of we have a seal as an organisation, a formal seal, and where there's a significant legal contract, we will use that seal. And this report provides details of those 2 occasions by which it's been used since we last met as a board. I would like the board to note as well that we we have to do a paper to you at the end of the year and after 6 months where we summarise everything that's gone on during the year. So this isn't the only chance we'll have. There will be an annual summary as well.
Great, thank you. Diolch yn iawn. Unrhyw cwestiwn ar hynny? If not, then if I can go to the recommendations and seek your agreement, that firstly we're assured that there is work ongoing to develop the risk reporting risk management framework. And we've approved the recommended reporting. And I think in our discussions, we've emphasised that this is work in progress, good work so far, and there's much more work to do around it, and we'll be looking to have a board development session to continue so that we can bring something in a final format to the board in September. So are we all happy with that recommendation that we are assured on the ongoing work?
Yes.
Okay, then the next recommendation to consider the current draft of the corporate risk register, identify any risks. I think we have done that. We've highlighted further risks, but there'll be opportunity to do that further, hopefully in our informal session. Then Audit Wales board effectiveness report, we've raised other matters that Phil will look to incorporate and share with us further. Are we happy with that? And then the National COVID Inquiry, UK National COVID Inquiry report, giving us the latest position. Everybody happy with that? And then finally, the Chair's action, no Chair's action, and the Common Seal enacted on record. Everybody happy with that? Okay, great. Diolch fawr iawn, and thanks to Phil and the team for all the work around those items. Ymlaen, awn ni i'r...
Okay, we'll go on then to the next item,
adroddiad pwyllgor archwilio,
which is the report of the Audit Committee,
adroddiad gan Karen. So,
which is a report by Karen.
Report of the Audit Committee. Karen, I think it's just a brief verbal report. A brief verbal report, I think you have for us today.
Thanks, Chair. So we had a private audit committee meeting on the 24th of July. We covered 3 key areas, which was the progress of the annual accounts today at the point, the draft response to Audit Wales letter for those charged with governance, and we also had sight on the 2021-22 account and fraud report. So those are the 3 areas that we covered. So we received a very good presentation from Russell Caldecott, our new interim exec director of finance, on the 22-23 annual accounts completion. Russell drew our attention to various things, including the cumulative underspend of 1.2 million, and he took us through the key financial analysis of income expenditure and answered questions by the committee. The committee noted the challenges faced by the finance team in relation to IFRS 16, the quinquennial review, and indexation that have been applied to all of that, I think. I'm not sure. Some of it, if not all of it. And those were some of the challenges that had helped in the delay of getting the final accounts over the finish line. We also had a presentation from Tony Utley, who provided more detail around some of the subjective aspects of the annual accounts related to some of the provisions that have been made, where a more objective view had to be taken, and those things are things like accruals for annual leave, health and safety executive fine that we're likely to have to pay at some point. So that was Tony's update. Russell also gave us assurance around the timetable for submission of the accounts over the next 3 weeks, bearing in mind that we were already delayed and we had Welsh Government were aware of this, but we're working to a new deadline now. So we needed to get the accounts to Audit Wales as soon as possible after the 24th, and I'm pleased to say that the finance team were able to present the account to Audit Wales that very afternoon. And as a result of that, Audit Wales are anticipating they will have a draft IAS 260 with us by mid this week. Is that correct, Russell?
It is, yeah.
And so now Audit Wales will be able to conclude their work. The plan is that we'll have an extraordinary committee meeting on the 24th of August to do the final review of the accounts, followed by an extraordinary board meeting, which will enable the accounts to be signed off. And Audit Wales are happy that this timetable can be achieved too. So fingers crossed, nothing crops up in the meantime to prevent that from happening. I'll pause there in case there's anything that I would like to add that I've not mentioned around the annual accounts.
Yeah, Karen, before bringing Russell in, can we just say an official croeso welcome to us, Russell? I think this is week 4 for you, is it?
Start of 5, maybe, Chair.
Okay. Okay, and I think it's fair to say that you come in at an interesting juncture, as they say, but we're really grateful for your work and the whole team, in fact, grasping the work at this particular time. So really grateful. Good summary from Karen, I think, of our discussions at T Pawb in Wrexham a week ago. So anything to add, Russell?
No, I think that's a really good summary of where we find ourselves. So we commence in the 21st, meeting scheduled for the 24th, meeting of the audit committee, and then an extraordinary board meeting. And following that with submission of the accounts. That's absolutely the update I would have given.
Great. Thanks very much for that.
We then had a walk through the audit inquiries letter. This has been developed in the preceding week in conjunction with internal audit, finance, council fraud, me as audit chair. And the conclusion of that was that we were happy with the draft letter, subject to Carol having a review of it on her return from annual leave before final sign-off. That's from the management response perspective. We also agreed, and I don't know whether it's been done yet, but there was an additional risk that we wanted to add as a result of some of the challenges highlighted as part of the meeting around SPAC, and that there's still a potential risk to financial governance due to that vacancy and various changes that may or may not occur in the coming months. And so we wanted to add that both to the risk assurance work that Phil's been doing, but also just to note that we were aware of that risk for Audit Wales' benefit, and that we will be monitoring that going forward, both at board and audit committee. And then finally, sorry, Russell, would you like to add anything for that one?
No, that's fine again.
Okay, and then finally we have size of account fraud report, and there was a bit of confusion around the date of this report. The 22-23 report is also due in September, but unfortunately there hasn't been a forum by which the 21-22 report could be reviewed either. So we were able to note the report on the 24th, but it does still need to come to the next audit committee that formal sign off. So that will be coming on the 15th of September. We'll take both the reports. Carl Woodward drew our attention to something which I'll mention because it was something that I had appreciated, which was the Bribery Act 2010, citing that the Health Board needed adequate procedures in place to protect against bribery and corruption. If not, board members could be fined. And I thought I would just share that. And when I read it, I was like, okay. So, we also need to make sure that all our policies and procedures are monitored along with awareness of our staff. So we'll be monitoring that at audit committee, but also we had a conversation around comms with the wider team because I found out only 50% of staff are online. So we've got to find alternatives to making sure that they're aware of the council fraud policy. And that's probably it for council fraud. And as audit chair and on behalf of the committee, I'd like to commend the efforts of both the finance team and Audit Wales in what has probably been quite a challenging few months to make sure that we have a really robust set of accounts this financial year. So your efforts were noted at the meeting, but I'd like to also make sure that they are at this point.
Thanks very much, Karen. Thanks for the comprehensive report and that final point which was made at the meeting, but we can reiterate it now. We're really grateful for the work and the partnership between ourselves and Audit Wales, and we're looking forward to getting to the finishing line. Any questions for Karen? No? Okay, thank you very much, Karen, again for the work and the work of the committee. Are we all happy to receive that report from Karen? It's a verbal report, but it's a very comprehensive one. I'm sure you all agree. Well, we'll have this. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Ymlaen i'r adroddiad nesaf.
So we go on then to the next report, Remuneration Committee.
All got a copy of the report. Do we on ganlinellu dau beth?
I just want to underline two things. You will all have heard the announcement, but it's in this committee. It was agreed to extend an agreement with Carol as interim chief exec until the end of March 2024, which is excellent news. We're all pleased about, and we're very grateful if we can note our thanks to Powys Health Board then, and especially the chair that have facilitated this. Very grateful to them. And more than anything, we're very grateful to Carol for her willingness and all the energy she brings with her. So thank you, Carol. And then the last point of this report, it notes another meeting in August, which is true, but I think the date will change again. We might take advantage of a special meeting of the board to have this meeting after that. It's yet to be decided anyway. So if you're all happy to accept the report, and unless there's any questions, if not, do we all accept the report? Thank you. And that's the end of that section. We'll go on then to section 3 and 3.1, financial performance.
And financial performance. And Russell, this is where we can turn to you for your first presentation to us at the board. And as I say, a very warm welcome to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'd like to extend the thanks as well to the team. It's been really welcoming starting and all the 4 weeks. It's clear that everyone is really engaged in moving forward, so really positive. In terms of the finances, although the report is there at month 2, I will talk a little bit about month 2, but extend that through into month 3's reported performance, if I may. So first of all, just to re-emphasise that from Welsh Government's perspective, the health boards have signed up for a collective deficit position of 648 million, and our annual plan is £134.1 million of that deficit. And that does amount to essentially us committing resources in terms of cash that go beyond our earnings envelope for the year. So we will need to secure that additional cash through that plan submission. In terms of our current performance, we've seen at month 2 a £2.9 million deterioration in position on the back of a £1 million deterioration in April, so 3.9 million. That deterioration has continued. So going into month 3, you can see our run rate has moved £5.4 million deficit in month. So we are now at a cumulative £9.3 million deficit. And when you consider our current cash holdings of 4.8, you can see that that starts to really emphasise how we're going beyond a plan that committed more cash resource, and having to find that additional cash as well is going to be incredibly challenging for us. So a very difficult position. As we move forward, it's essentially driven through pay costs. We've also got savings program delivery underperformance, and there's a level of drug expenditure in there as well with some other items thrown in. So a £9.3 million challenge for us in order to bring that resources back, but also more importantly, looking at that run rate position, every month that gets more difficult to recover from. So every month we delay in taking those challenges on board, we then face a bigger challenge in the remaining months of the calendar year. So unfortunately, Chair, a position that shows that we are deteriorating in terms of financial performance, certainly in revenue, and there is a real concern for us as we move forwards, just in terms of our cash projections.
Okay, thanks for that, Russell. Anything to add? Any comments or questions? Gareth and Claire?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say, and I'm sure I'm right in this, that it's while it's disappointing that we've only got the month 2 data, and this is a factor of the change of interims, and I know that we will be more timely in our future receipt of data. I did want to make the point, which I think Russell has illustrated very clearly, that I think at the last Finance Committee we were told that although month 2 had seen a shortfall in terms of where we expected to be financially, that there was an improvement over month 1, and I think I was a bit sceptical about that. But I want to now say, hold my hand up and say, as I think in my report, it says that but things weren't getting worse, but obviously they were. So apologies for that. I would be interested if Russell has got the data, if he can tell us where we are in terms of the planned savings, because one of the things that was clear in the month 2 report was that there were very few savings that were in the green category, and the others were sort of much more speculative, if you like. I think I did wonder on agency costs, which is something that we've discussed a lot and that we are, I think, all worried about. And I know there are lots of mitigations in place, but I wondered whether we should have a trajectory about what we think spend will be, as we have with some of the other trajectories in the annual plan. And I'm interested more generally in what we can do in terms of prescribing costs. The final point was there's a reference here which I think we also talked about at our last board meeting in passing, about this concept of the Star Chamber to review cost pressures and investments, and the papers which obviously meant to say that these sessions would be held by the end of July. As it's said 1st of July, I just wonder, I would understand if there's been some slippage in that, but are we still intending to do that? Because I think that's really important, and that we have a robust process for that.
So Russell, and maybe Carol, some comments.
Yeah, so the green savings performance has improved quite significantly over month 2. So we've moved to £12.8 million worth of identified green savings. We do have pipeline and red-rated schemes as well that are waiting approval and moving through that process of traffic lighting, which will take us up just beyond the £20 million threshold. It leaves us about £4 million short of our £25.2 million target for the year. In terms of agency performance, so we were at £6.7 million in May. That's deteriorated, unfortunately. So we've committed £7 million of agency cost as we've gone into June. That is circa £1 million above our average run rate in the prior year. So we were roughly 6.1 million per month, and now we're hitting £7 million. And obviously, it's concerning with winter months approaching as to where that may take us.
Anyone else? Carol, some comments?
Yeah, I've got some general comments as well as, some of the process stuff. I think this is a really serious position that we're in, and an escalating position. We're not alone as a health board. The other health boards in Wales, and in fact, we might look at the NHS in England and Scotland, the same types of financial pressures being applied. The key issues we've got here, especially with a run rate that is going in the wrong direction, is that we've got a very short window in which to take some escalated action now. And so the focus on process, what's the process that we're going to be putting in place around that escalation, and what choices and decisions might we need to take as a board to reduce the level of expenditure. We know that the cost of living, the whole inflationary issues are still very live. We know the economic picture and public sector finances are not going to improve this year or next. So we're dealing with the net, and beyond that, I'm less clear, but we're dealing with this position for the next 2 years. So we're going to have to escalate our level of options and choices here. I think that will include reviewing investments that we've made already, or investments that we'd planned to make, and may defer, may reduce, may slow, may cease, but also where we can and should do things differently in the organisation. We're going to need to have a mechanism for the board in which we can agree some of the principles of how we will be operating. I'm very keen to do that in partnership with trade unions, with staff, with partners, but we can't just move from meeting to meeting saying this is looking worse. We do have to put some escalated actions in.
And I've already raised with Russell and Carol an idea of getting a small group together to have an oversight, and making sure that anything that progresses is based on the principles that have agreed here at the board. So that's a work in progress, but I think it's important to get that oversight and overview, not in the detail, but making sure that the work is progressing along the lines that we wish, as Carol has touched upon. Claire, you want to come in?
Thanks. Probably some of the points I was going to make have been picked up. It is a really worrying situation. Ren, can you hear me? Sorry, I had a little note say I was too quiet. No one ever tells me. So I think looking at, I guess for me, I'm thinking short and medium term here. So there's a real challenge in here, and actually some of the transformation change we may want to deliver, the time isn't right now to have much of an impact in year. So we do need to look at what the short term, putting the brakes on things effectively, because that's all you can do, isn't it, when you need to just cut some spend quickly. But I think as a board, we've got to get more engaged in the plans for the longer term transformation, and not as a team. And it's not finance teams, the whole organisation just be so focused on the in-year situation that we have this conversation again next spring or next summer. So would really welcome some more conversations about it. And I suppose the other bit I don't understand is, so if we take back to my comments on orthopaedics a while ago, so if we can get people out of hospital quicker, we can get more people in to get their operations who've been waiting too long. But actually that performance, which is reducing cost, actually also means we've got more people coming into the system, which means we're going to do, I'm oversimplifying, we'll do more replacements, which actually still leaves a cost in the system. And there's a real balance as well, isn't there, between how we improve productivity, which is a great thing to do, but it won't actually necessarily save us any money. So really, 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 really hard choices, because I would hate to think that one of the things we end up having to do is to slow down some of the progress we're making on key performance areas, because actually it's going to put more cost in the system.
It's that unintended consequence, isn't it? And that need to be able to see the big picture. I think we're all keen that what we do in this space ties in with the strategic direction of the organisation, what we're trying to achieve in special measures and the annual plan. But we also know that there are things we're going to do that will have a detrimental effect on what we're trying to deliver for residents of North Wales. No question about that. That's where we are. But our approach has got to be one that is an intelligent one. I could use that word in its broadest sense. And I think it would be good for us to take a look at this, hopefully sometime next month, in a maybe informal or board development session where we can talk about some of the principles and gather our thoughts and then get a group in place to have that oversight, I think. So I think that we've got lots of work to do on this, and some of it has got to be detailed, but it's got to be driven by some of the principles that we've mentioned. Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I only to say, just in terms of those comments, so we did mention earlier around benchmarking. I was going to mention around our performance model. So it is very impressive, the transformation we've seen within the trauma and orthopaedics. But understanding, is that taking us back to what the benchmark is, or is that taking us beyond that position?
Yes.
So what's the level of opportunity still there? Yes. And I think that's important to build into our cost improvement and transformational work that we do going forwards.
So that's a very good point. Are we getting to where we should have been anyway?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a reality check, and you know, being open and honest. And then how much more can we achieve? I think that's a very good point.
And then the cost saving benefit analysis from doing that work will be effectively, if we're delivering the same level of planned activity models, it's to move it to in-house capacity, so we don't have to incur premium working costs, etc. So we still deliver what we said in our plan in terms of activity profile. We're just doing it in a far more cost-effective manner.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for that. Really useful. Mike.
Yeah. Thanks. Just picking up on the comment Russell made, that pays a big part of the big slice of our cost with a 5% increase. It looks like it's across all staff groups. There's reference to the pay awards for 22-23 and for 23-24. Do we know yet whether they're going to be fully funded by the Welsh Government? That's my first question. My second thing is, why weren't they last year? Was there a good reason?
Okay, who would like to answer that on behalf of the Welsh Government?
In fairness to Russell, that's quite a tricky one.
In principle.
Yes, and the principle, you're absolutely right, Mike. The principle is Welsh Government have always funded pay awards. They haven't expected health boards to fund that. Now, if we take that though, Welsh Government don't have a special pot. It is still the wider health budget for Wales. So it's got to come from somewhere. And so when we talk about the deficits that all of the health boards are challenged by, it means that Welsh Government have less money to offset those. So in reality, the whole of the budget gets allocated already in a different way. And I know that Gareth had raised an AOB earlier about industrial relations, and it is very clear from all of the literature that the workforce feel worn out and undervalued, and the more workforce gaps you have, the more undervalued and worn out workforce feels. So we're stuck in this real challenge here, and now we've layered on a financial problem as well, which does mean we must do some things differently in order to try and tackle that. But yeah, your fundamental point is Welsh Government, and I think that's part of the challenge the Welsh Government are trying to grapple with is because it's not just health workers, of course, it's other sector workers as well. Where do they get that money from?
Okay, diolch yn iawn, thank you for that answer. Unrhyw arall yn yw sylw? Os nad oes, ydyn ni'n hapus I derbyn yr adroddiad yna, and
if not, we're happy to accept that report.
They have achieved, and we can receive that report. But can we also note, before we do the capital programme report and the adjustment to that, does anybody wish to say anything about that? Is there something you wish to highlight from the capital programme in particular or so?
Thank you, Chair. Now, so only that we have the £18.8 million as confirmed. We have a plan, and that's gone through a risk assessment process through the capital investment group. And we will be reviewing that programme normally around month 7, just to understand if there are any slippage or delays, and therefore we can reutilise that resource and bring forward other schemes. So that's just actively managed through that committee, and happy to take any questions with you, Chair.
Thanks very much. And we've got a couple of business cases in with Welsh Government, haven't we, on one or two things in particular. And I know that's another thing government are very anxious about is the of capital available to health boards and other organisations as well, of course. So, any questions on the capital in particular, Karen?
Wasn't about the capital in particular, it was just an observation in the annual plan referring to the capital programme while lending in Q4.
Yeah.
Clearly some of these will be multi-year projects. I just wonder whether there was something we could just put an asterisk, so this, in the annual plan, so you know that it's a multi-year development rather than all these things.
Good point. Yes, we will note that.
Okay, so are we happy to accept all those reports?
2 reports to accept: the capital one that we've just mentioned, and then the financial report and what has been outlined by Russell. We'll turn to Gareth in a minute for his report, but we will, before we do these 2 reports, are we happy to receive them? Pawb yn hapus? Iawn, diolch yn iawn. A Gareth, rwan felly troi at y ti a'r pwyllgor, wyt ti'n cadeirio.
So Gareth now, and the committee he is chairing, we've got a copy in your papers. Thank you.
So I would take the report as read. The one thing, I think if there's one issue I shouldn't say one issue, it's loads of issues that I particularly worry about at the moment in terms of coming on to obviously performance in a moment, but is this question that came out quite clearly in the committee about the performance on trolley weights and ambulance transfers at a time of the year when you wouldn't, I mean, I'm not an expert on any of this, but when you wouldn't expect it to be particularly bad. That's obviously linked to the very high levels of medically fit for discharge, which is a key issue, and I know it's been highlighted by the BBC this morning. So it's not, I know none of this is unique to us, but I think it's a really worrying set of issues. And to be honest, I'm not clear that we've got a clear plan for addressing it. And I appreciate the problems are structural. One of the things that I'm sorry, I've now forgotten where it was, but at the meeting that we had informally to the audit committee last week, it emerged that one of the reasons for delayed discharge is while obviously care home places is a key one, that some of them are within the not the gifts, but are within our own activities, and it was the biggest single reason, although that's still not the majority when it's the way it's categorised. So I think that is something we could really focus on. What can we do to speed up things like? I think it's to do with the pharmacy operations and also to do with our own assessments of needs. So I'd be keen to do that. The other point I want to make very quickly was just to explain a little bit in my report about the report on the shared services partnership. There were 2 issues there, and it's perhaps a little bit gnomic. So one is that the shared services partnership report to us that there are very significant savings for us in the way in which they negotiate drug prices. And I'd be quite interested in understanding that better. So I have asked for the shared service partnership to come and talk to us. But even if you understand it better, of course, what goes in our budget is what we actually pay for the drugs. The savings anyway are notional, but it'd be interesting to understand it. And there was one other point from the shared service partnership report, which is more a joint problem between us and them, which is about what seemed to me as a relative outsider to the health service, very long time scales for making appointments. So the target is 71 days, and that's been missed in nearly half of cases in the last year in Betsy. And it seems to me, I know there's anecdotal evidence that we lose staff because we've interviewed them, we want to appoint them, but in the meantime, they've got job offers elsewhere more quickly. I don't know whether that is the case, but I certainly heard it said about some clinicians. So I think that is in the greater scheme of things, it may not be the top problem, but I think if we're looking at one of the problems we've got here is the number of unfilled posts and interim posts, then that we ought to be seeing what we can do to improve that. So thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr, Gareth. Siŵr bod yna gwestiynau sylwadau.
Thank you, Gareth. I'm sure there'll be questions.
And I'll ask Carol to field those and invite any others who wish to respond on some of the detail as well. Some important matters around discharge, some important matters around entry into healthcare and the potential for us to improve performance and an understanding of the issues. And I'm not sure of the detail you can present today, but perhaps there's something a follow-up in the committee as well to drill down into some of that stuff and see how the work along special measures actually helps us on that improvement journey as well. But over to you, Carol.
Yeah, thanks very much. My assessment, I think, Gareth, is that we don't yet have a fully comprehensive whole system plan around urgent emergency care that really involves end-to-end, so community in particular, and working with very closely with the local authorities. There is a lot of commitment from local authorities to work together on this, and I was really pleased about conversations that we've had, but there is a lot of work to do. We have got sadly hundreds of people in our system who are stuck, some of whom, a national work indicates about 50% are delayed because they're waiting for something from the health service. So if we can unblock that, that's not to say they go home straight away. They may just be dealt with another block, down the line. But we do need to take full ownership of the things that we should be doing. But primarily, this real investment in community service and community support is a national problem. And you probably know better than I, Gareth, about how many commissions there have been on social care. And so I know successive governments have really struggled to get to grips with this. And with our profile of our population, this is a problem that is here for some time, and it's a problem because people are being actually affected, aren't they, in terms of their ability to be able to go back home, and I think that's a major sort of safety and experience issue. Why that's come up, I think, in the context of the finance and performance is really interesting, because actually we've got hundreds of beds open that are unfunded. So we're spending a lot of money on care that isn't ideal for people. So we have to think very differently about that. But we have got to do something for the year coming. And we've got a new executive director of operations joining us from tomorrow. She's in the audience. And this is one of the key things, I think, working with Nick, who's been the clinical lead supporting some of this. We've got to make some progress on that. It feels quite intractable, but we're going to have to, but staff, when I'm out and about speaking and listening to their views, they do have ideas. It's about how we bring that through. But if we can make progress, it will benefit patients, but also the finances, it will improve.
Yeah. Diolch yn iawn. And since you've name-checked Adele, I think we can say croeso and a really warm welcome to you. And day one, I think. So
day one's tomorrow.
So keen she's here before everyone. So, no, that's great. So a really warm welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I think it feels as if there's some detailed work required. Maybe the committee can be part of that, Gareth, to drive some of this forward and sort of bring the different strands together and drill down and see what exactly is happening and some recommendations. Something for the committee to consider, of course, and for you and your colleagues to decide. But it feels as if that's an area of work that would benefit from that approach. Any other questions to Gareth? Unrhyw sylwadau? Na, os nad oes, gawn ni ddiolch yn fawr iawn.
Okay, well, thank you very much to Gareth and the committee for the excellent work that they're doing. And thank you for the report today. Are you all happy to accept that report? Thank you. We go on then to the next item, 3.2, annual accounts. We've already had quite a full report from Karen about the latest developments.
If there's anything else to add, Russell, from Karen, bringing us right up to date, sort of almost to the day on the developments with annual accounts. If there's anything else to add, then now is your window. Otherwise, we will look forward to progress as you've all already outlined as well.
Yes, no, I think it was a very comprehensive review, and we look forward to receiving the ISA 260 from our Audit Wales colleagues in the short term.
Okay, thanks. Everybody happy with that? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Item next, 3.3.
3.3, the integrated performance report.
On the integrated performance report, and please, if you wish to highlight things that have been detailed in the report, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask any questions or any comments. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the four, first of all, just in review of emergency care performance, and I think we've touched on some of these aspects through different conversations as we've gone through, but the 4-hour performance continues to improve. So now it's 70.4%. So we look to continue that trend. We're also seeing the reduction month on month on the 12-hour trolley weights, which has already been referenced through the PPIC report. So it's still higher than we'd like it to be, obviously at the 2,600. So more work to do. And we've already mentioned the 300 medically fit for discharge patients that would free up the beds, of course. So they're key metrics that are being produced. There's some ambulance handover delays built into that as well, which were above the targeted trajectory on by circa just over 100. And again, we'd look to improve performance around that handover period. Those are those are handovers that are over 1 hour in duration. In terms of planned care, if I may just highlight both 156 weeks, RTT trajectory performance on outpatient elective, both improving. So we are making inroads to those significant weights for our elective care. We're performing really well in terms of cancer treatments. It's at 60%. It's not the 75% that we targeted, of course, but compared to using the benchmarks for other health boards, that's really good performance for us. So again, something for us to be mindful of, using that benchmark to assess where we find ourselves relatively is always an important measure. We've mentioned the TNO a few times, so that's good. And I'll re-emphasise the point really, if we can look to make sure that we've got statistical analysis for services, then we can target improvements and make sure we are targeting those where there is room for improvement. Of course, that improves our sustainability, but also treats patients sooner, faster, quicker, which is clearly what we're looking to do. I just mentioned on the mental health provision, so we're slightly below the standard, but I think that's because we're looking towards what are long waiters. But we see demand to being fairly static as we move forward. So it is about dealing with those long waiters, bringing those back. And we are only circa 3% short of the target and trajectory that we need to deliver. So that's good performance. Diagnostics, there are action plans within endoscopy and radiology to improve our performance against the 8-week standard. But clearly there are about 9,100 patients waiting just below, and that seems a fairly static figure month on month. So it's understanding the traction under those action plans and seeing if they're making gains as we go forward. And if I may, the only other element to bring to the notice of members is just the year-on-year comparison of our sickness rates. So one way of mitigating and not requiring, of course, the level of agency or temporary workforce or ban would be to ensure our workforce are fit to attend work.
And we have seen that drop to 5.13% as opposed to the 6% and just above that it was in historic periods. So that again is something to be commended, and obviously continued focus on the areas that are still fairly high in terms of that metric that are included within the report.
Great. So thanks, Russell. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Unrhyw gwestiwn, unrhyw sylw?
Any questions or comments?
Gareth.
Well, I'd sort of first of all welcome the report, and I think we've got some very data-rich and informative reporting. There's perhaps scope to sort of bring out the highlights a bit more, but I really think that the basis of the information is really valuable. I think generally, you know, I think there is some good news in this, but I do think it's worrying that we're not on track on, I think it's 30 and 53 quantitative indicators. But what I'm a bit more concerned about, I think, is that we only just have signed off the annual plan a month ago. But as of the end of June, we were already off our trajectories. In most of the cases, I think 30 and 10 out of the 12 that I could see highlighted in section 2 of this report. So, I mean, we had that discussion, obviously, with the annual plan about you want to be ambitious without setting yourself up to fail. But I'm quite concerned that already at the time we submitted the annual plan, we were actually behind where we thought to be. So I'd be interested in whether we think that the situation can be retrieved in some of the most obvious ones. The ones I would highlight are the 52-week target for the first outpatient appointment, the 100% who passed their follow-up dates, and diagnostic weights. So I wonder whether we think we can get back to the trajectories or whether we already know that we're not going to deliver. And just one minor but important point, because it's one of the areas I think we're particularly weak, and again, I know it's unique to Betsy, but neurodevelopment. And I think when we signed off the trajectory there was a note which said, well, this is not taking into account the ongoing procurement procedure, which we hope will make a big difference. And obviously that hasn't delivered, presumably because there is such a shortage of supply. But you know, are there any fallback options? There's something about, you know, but I'm just be interested in understanding that, because otherwise our trajectory on that plan is going to look pretty poor.
Okay, Gareth, diolch yn fawr iawn. And also, when responding to that, can we have some clarity around, okay, how does special measures inform this? Is everything in special measures going to deliver some of the stuff that's been highlighted? Or if not, what's our approach to ensuring that we do improve the performance if it's not covered by everything in special measures? So maybe Carol, if I could
pick it up,
start
and
with
then
you.
colleagues can come in. So I'm going to start with the neurodevelopment, if that's okay, because I think Karen picked this up earlier as well in relation to children's. So I think we do have a worrying position because 2/3 of people who are on our list are waiting already over 26 weeks. The demand across the UK has been huge, and services are needing to respond in a very different way to try and meet that. I haven't checked exactly when we're doing this, but I'm anticipating within the next couple of weeks that we have a workshop on neurodevelopment that draws in expertise from other health boards and the national league. Because when we talked earlier about the right door, as in the no wrong door, you know, there's been a lot of work about different approaches that can support people who are waiting for assessment. We know that families want that assessment because it is often the gateway to additional support in education, for example. So those assessments are still going to be needed. But what are we going to do to support a bit earlier in the stream? So there is some action in relation to that. In terms of a couple of the other elements, largely around planned care. So the planned care programme is now being formulated. We can see some traction in orthodontics, as has been mentioned. The focus is over the last month or two in particular has been on the long waits. And so if we're putting the energy in the long waits, there may be some tolerance we have to accept around the shorter waits. But these will be clinically assessed. So just to give that assurance. I think there's an awful lot more we need to do about outpatients. and in particular, people who are waiting for outpatients who may be able to be supported in a different way, the follow-ups. It just strikes me that we've yet to fully utilise the appropriate, patient-initiated follow-ups or seeing on symptoms and that sort of thing. We're still hearing stories of people going to an outpatient appointment. They're there for 5 minutes to be told everything's fine, and I'm not sure that's widespread, but we do. That resource is important. Just on process, Gareth, I mentioned earlier the performance framework. So within the performance framework, we'll be very clear about the areas that are for escalation and what escalation actually means in terms of action planning and trajectories and further interventions and support and importantly accountability for delivery, so that we're not spreading ourselves so thin, but we're really focusing on the areas that are most challenging to us. Sorry, I don't know if you wanted to add any more. I was on a roll there.
I'll bring Chris in first, and then maybe Russell wish to add anything. So, Chris,
you were on a roll. I was going to just add it on annually the new development roundtable is important to the 10th of August. We've been at the weights and I think we had a conversation about sustainability, neurodevelopmental services. It isn't about getting more runners or running faster. The model isn't right, and it's about transformation. So, looking forward to that section.
Great, thanks, Chris. Anything to add, Russell?
I think only to add that I think the development of the performance report, using the quadrants that are supported through the accountability framework, and just making sure that's relative to the different proportions of the organisation, so it can be used through care groups and moving straight up the organisation through the various committees, so it's profiled at the right levels. And building subcommittee oversight, I think, is quite important to that as well, so that we can have that debate through subcommittee and then bring it to the board with the escalated issues.
Great, good point. Thank you. I'll bring Gareth, then Karen.
I just wanted to partially answer your point, Gareth, about where we are with trajectories, really. So you mentioned diagnostics, and that's what I thought I would come in on, really. The performance last month for diagnostics looks as if we've made no improvement. It looks like a fairly stable position. But in the body of the report, you may have noticed that there was a informatics issue that was identified in relation to one of the modalities, which is neurophysiology. That has added in the region of about 900 patients onto the waiting list. So actually, in that context, it's actually been a good month within diagnostics. And without that, you would have seen probably a drop of around 1,000 patients from that waiting list. So most modalities had a good month, were online to deliver on the trajectory. Unfortunately, this the identification of a waiting list error in that particular modality has just changed the picture.
It's good to know, but it's also a reminder, isn't it, about how sensitive these things are. You get a problem with one technical area, and suddenly you've got an extra 900 people on the waiting list.
Karen?
Mine was just on the workforce section around attendance management and absence, and noting that there's work going on to support people who are managing people who are on long-term sick, but as stress, depression and anxiety are 27% of most of the people's sickness that are long-term. I'm just wondering whether we're looking at a more proactive approach to sort of recognise early signs of stress, or whether there's things that we can do to improve well-being as a whole, particularly playing back to Claire's comment around culture and having that happy, motivated work. But, what are we doing to be a little bit more proactive in recognising some of the symptoms sooner, rather than managing the consequence of someone going off sick?
So early intervention, I don't know if you have anything to share on that, Jason, in terms of well-being and the way we care for our staff and workforce.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that we have carried on is our staff wellbeing and support service. And that's a service that we've established with a number of psychological leads to ensure that we're able to navigate people both through the NHS here within Wales, but also as well to try and fast track them within our own internal services. So there are a range of different supports that we have through through that route, but also as well, we recognise that sometimes people may not necessarily want to have conversations directly with their employer, and so we have a contract in place with an organisation called Real City Partnership that provides external counselling and support and signposting for staff, but also as well to implement that we have our own in-house counsellors, which are part of the occupational health function. We've implemented changes around the people operating model this year, and we've implemented teams much more closely aligned into the IHCs. So to support them as well in accessing, so if it's team development support we need to implement, if it's an organisation development issue, they can pick up those types of issues much more sensitively. But what I would say is that probably the first port that we have is our staff wellbeing and support services, and they can hopefully signpost people to the right service, but also as well provide clinical psychological support as well for staff who may be in immediate need of either support or counselling. So there's a range of different offers that we've got, because we recognise that a one size fits all just doesn't fit our people and our population here in North Wales.
Put it on. Claire.
Doug, just a couple of points, Chair. Perhaps taking us right back to A&E departments and challenges still around ambulance delays and handovers. And I was just interested in the charts in the report that showed that Ysbyty Gwynedd is performing worse than Wrexham, Miler and Glenclwyd. And yet, in terms of external inspection, we've been focusing a lot around Glenclwyd and improvements to the A&E department there. So I'm just wondering, is there something that we can learn from what we're doing in the other two hospitals to help with improvement in Gwynedd? And then I think the other thing was that what's obvious in here is that it's a bit like squeezing the end of something, isn't it? That we're reducing some of the first appointments for people, that those numbers are coming down a bit, but then we're struggling to do the diagnostics and we're struggling to do the treatment. So we're kind of improving one end of the blockage, and then it's just moving to there and moving to there. So I guess that kind of says that back to the point around savings, it's going to be transformational change, isn't it? That helps us to be able to resolve the kind of end to end. And presumably, and I've never worked in health, so I don't know. It's not a trick question, honestly. Presumably what we use those first appointments for then is to prioritise people for treatment. We don't just have a sausage machine, do we, where if I'm seen today, I'm at the bottom of the queue then for the diagnostics and the treatments? Or does it depend on what my health issue might be?
Anybody wish to respond?
Because otherwise there's no point in getting better at doing those first if I'm still at the back of another queue then, or at the back of another queue.
I'm looking at three people.
Sorry.
Carol, Nick and Chris maybe have different comments to make.
I was just going to say, increasingly, you're absolutely right, Claire. You don't want to use an appointment that then just says, oh, you need some tests. Increasingly, the pathways are being developed to say you can go straight to test and then bring those test results, if you like, to the appointment with the consultant. Now, that is quite a change in practice, and we need to do more work on the referral from the GP in, so that there is confidence that the right tests are being asked for at the right time. But when we look at the prostate pathway, for example, there is good evidence to say if this test and this test shows X, that person can go straight then into a decision-making appointment, rather than one that just says, oh, I need to order some tests for you. I don't know, Nick, if you've got a view on how we change that clinical practice.
We need to move away from that. Within all this conversation, there's a huge opportunity, isn't there, to do things in a slightly different way to catalyse these conversations. There's a lot of work going on in what has previously been a fairly staid environment of the primary-secondary care interface, where we get the clinicians from the two areas to sit and talk about things. That's turned into a really quite an exciting format, where people are really saying, how can we do things differently? What are our roles? And what are we doing to facilitate flow further up the pathway? And that perhaps gives me some optimism that we're beginning to learn from those conversations. If I can just respond to the first part of your question around the emergency departments, I think our emergency departments are quite different. There's very different populations they serve and challenges within the three. They are visiting each other to learn what they can distill from each other's improvement journeys, as well as visiting other health boards such as Cardiff and Vale, who've seen vast improvements over the last few months. As ever, when you look at the metrics, it doesn't tell the whole story. Where there's a long ambulance delay, there may not be a long wait to see a doctor or a long triage delay. But I think there's fantastic practice in all three, but there are also challenges in all three. And if you rightly say, they're trying to look at each other and what they can learn from it.
Anything else to add? Mike? And then we'll bring this item.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say it's really good to have the benchmarking, both longitudinal and and Wales, and also the illustrations I find really helpful. And thanks for the detail in this report. One thing stuck out for me in unplanned care. There are actions taken for pretty much everything else, but in thrombectomy for stroke, no one had a thrombectomy in this month, which I find remarkable given the numbers of strokes that we admit to Betsy. There's an implication of travel times to Walton from Centre and West being challenging. Then in the actions, there's talk about getting software really to improve the speed of throughput of a patient in the service to the decision point thrombectomy. So my question is, why did no patient receive a thrombectomy in that month? That is truly remarkable. Is it travel times? When we discussed this previously, we do have an emergency helicopter service. It's 15 minutes across Liverpool Bay to Walton. It is a long time in an ambulance, but I have a mixed picture of why this is happening from those responses. Is it that the travel time has been that people have missed the window of opportunity, which would be truly tragic for those patients? Or is it simply that we're too far away from Walton? I don't expect an answer at this meeting.
Take that away.
Yes, and can I say, having visited Liverpool last week and two hospitals, but not Walton, and I was also aware previously there's an issue about transport, and it's more complex than one would think, because of the cross-border issues and the way transport works, the English side of the border, and it's a complex issue, but it's one that I think we must resolve. It's one we need to really take a step back on and come up with a better solution than we've got. I think it's fair to say it does throw up some problems for us, which then impacts on patients. I think that's a fair conclusion. Nick, would you say?
Absolutely, Chair. And as Carol suggested, well, I think to take away, I do wonder, Mike, whether that data is accurate. That there's none. Of course, it's not just the transfer of the patient from one of our acute hospitals to Liverpool. No. It's also the time for transfer for that patient from their home to the diagnosis being made. And sadly, I think sometimes that's where the window of opportunity is lost. Absolutely no room for complacency. We'll come back later.
Thanks. And before we wrap this item up, can I just flag up again? There are lots of issues in this performance report that have been highlighted really well, very open and plain for us to see, and various people have highlighted that. Now, special measures doesn't cover it all. It's not going to deliver everything that's been highlighted in this report. So I think there's a piece of work for us to see where are these matters going in terms of the scrutiny, in terms of the work required, and then the assurance that will eventually come through to board. Where's it going before it comes to us, some of this stuff, because it's not all covered in special measures, and can we direct some to quality committee audit and PFIG and so on? I think there's a piece of work to do there. Which will then help us in terms of mapping the progress and flushing out some of the issues that we've had a really good discussion about this morning, or this afternoon, rather. It's this afternoon. So with that, Phil, did you want to add anything?
Well, no, thank you. I'd just like to take the action, really. I think it falls under a as well as that.
So I think it'll be picked up in the performance framework in terms of what goes where, what gets escalated in response to Gareth's question.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Everybody happy then to receive the report and the actions outlined? And thanks again for those who put that report together in the way they have. It's as people have said, it's very legible. So everybody happy? Diolch yn iawn. Ymlaen i'r eitem nesaf, felly item 3.4.
We'll go on to the next item, which is 3.4, the Integrated Quality Report.
Turn to you for this to begin with, and then we'll have Rhian drosodd at y ti wedyn, Rhian, I roi'r adroddiad.
And then followed by Rhian.
So Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Quality, of course, is a thread we've seen running through discussions around special measures, corporate risk register, performance report. Perhaps, if I may just now highlight one or two particular issues. This report is traditionally presented by the Director of Nursing, Angela, but we felt it quite important that actually the clinical executives who are jointly responsible for the quality agenda should take it in turns to present this report. So I'm glad you said that I would only start it, because some of the issues I'm probably less familiar with and will look to colleagues. But I think the point on the cover sheet that actually key to this, and it's within special measures, is not just the transactional stuff that we're doing, it's whether we're learning from it and whether we're changing practice as a result. And I think that's something that we hold the mirror up to ourselves rightly and regularly. If I distill out just 2 or 3 points from the reports then, on page 4, I'd like to draw your attention to the concerning issues with C. diff, a hospital-acquired infection within the Wrexham environment. A lot of work already carrying on by the facilities team in terms of the summer deep clean, which is really key, showing that it's our teams working together that really address and own the quality agenda. But also perhaps the opportunity for more responsible antibiotic prescribing. We've already touched on issues and potential advantages in the financial arena around prescribing. So perhaps a focus that's now taking place on the use of antibiotics demonstrates that different parts of our conversations today are actually fitting together. On page 5, I want to note and emphasise how seriously we take His Majesty Coroner's notices to us around prevention of future deaths. People will be familiar that this is where the coroner, as a result of an inquest, observes that he or she is concerned that there remains further work to do to prevent future deaths. And thus these are notices which we take extremely seriously. And these result to our ability to learn, carrying out our action plans, the way, and we've already touched on it within our unscheduled care response, how we transfer the care of a patient from one part of our organisation to another, but particularly perhaps around ambulance handover delays, and a lot of work and focus, as we've already heard today, along with local authority colleagues and our colleagues in the Welsh Ambulance Service, working together to ensure that we really put in place actions that genuinely will respond to those. Because, of course, behind the performance figures are individual patients and their families, and the coroner has highlighted some tragedies to us. Further on page 5, though, I'd want to highlight the de-escalation of our vascular services from being a service requiring significant improvement, but perhaps again within that to emphasise there's no room for complacency at all, and there is a huge amount of work still to take place. But I would want to really thank colleagues, the clinical and operational teams who have put a huge amount of work into taking forward some of the learning actions there that this board is all too familiar with. Perhaps if I just, before taking any questions, I just highlight there on the last page, there remains a lot of work to do. A lot of work has been done, but a lot of work remains to be done in terms of responding to incidents being finalised in a timely fashion, responses to complaints. I would observe, though, because a few of us have the pleasure of signing off those complaint letters, that the quality of those complaints is significantly improving. So it's not just about the numbers for me, it's about our confidence that actually those complaint letters genuinely answer the reason behind the complaint, and are starting to demonstrate that we're doing something about it. Thank you, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Diolch yn fawr, Nick. Unrhyw gwestiwn neu unrhyw sylw?
One of the things that I've struggled with this is obviously the timeliness of responding to complaints. But what the reports tell us each time is that we're pretty good at doing rapid learning events. And so it feels as if after something's happened, we do rapidly see what's gone wrong, what do we need to fix, what can we learn from it, how do we change practice going forward. Don't know who to look at that. So that kind of feels to me like you've kind of half done all the work you need to do to respond to the complaint at that point anyway. Because you've looked at the incident, seen what you need to do to change. So why is it such a problem in writing that up and responding to people?
Can I come in?
Certainly, Angela.
Thank you. So I think we do the rapid learning panels and those around incidents that have occurred. And I think you're right, we are doing that investigation. And I've had a conversation with Welsh Government colleagues around us utilising the mortality reviews and those reviews that we're undertaking to get that information ready for investigation responses. From a complaints perspective, we don't have those rapid learning reviews. The complaints come in from an individual post, them coming out of the organisation maybe, might be a considerable amount of time afterwards. And then we direct it through to the department to ask them to get the information. Again, I think we are wasting some time because there will be that review by the team and then it gets taken away to do some more work with it. So I think we've got some streamlining we could do around those to reduce the time it takes. And there's some different ways of working, certainly around the incidents and how we actually gathering that information. Because if you're doing a rapid learning panel and the medics have looked at the incident and have written down and summarised to me and Nick and Gareth holding those panels, then that information is actually there.
Yeah.
They've already had a Make It Safe, which is a very small team review, which they've identified the learning from. So as I say, we're going to be working on that as part of the work we're doing with Welsh Government and the learning framework we're going to be developing. We can look at those kind of things, and we're just sort of crafting it in the background of what the proposal would be for that to be taken.
Yeah, it just sort of feels like we're not joining things together well enough. So we've got probably some people called complaints officers, and then we've got people who are on the job doing the work, caring for people, and actually there's probably some of the answers to some things, because complaints will come in later, but in many of those cases there will have already been something probably done at the time. So it just feels like,
that'll be part of the clinical governance review. Okay. So the patient safety report has come in and some of the recommendations there, some of the changes that have been put in place in the last sort of 6 months, with the executive deputy directors of nursing taking patient experience and patient safety under their portfolios, changes with Matt's role around regulation, governance assurance, etc. We'll all be pulling together to make sure that we can streamline and we can keep on top. We have reduced the overdue complaints. So I started a year tomorrow.
And when the 1st of August, obviously to start a new job.
And I think my first meeting that week for the board, we had about 480 complaints overdue. We're at 263 today. We could do better. We could move faster, and we will be doing. But we are addressing it and taking it forward. And obviously, we recognise every day that we're not providing that assurance to families to give that response back is something that we're doing. So, we're all very focused, and we've put different mechanisms in place and processes now to try and help that.
Gareth.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that the format of the report is useful, and I appreciate the fact, if I've understood it rightly, that there's a more detailed report that goes to the committee, and then we get. So, and I think that's how it should be, and I'm sure that Russ and I will be working on that with context and feedback as well. Just getting a handle on the volume, it seemed to me that I think there were 300 complaints in the 2-month period of February and March. That sounds a lot to me, but I've got no idea how that compares with other health boards, whether that is, I mean, there are an awful lot of procedures happening, so it may, in terms of the scale of activity, it may not be, but I just wondered, do we have that's another area of interest in the benchmark, really.
Can I just come on that? So the actual numbers that we're working with are fairly consistent with what we've been receiving for a long time.
Right.
A little bit lower in the last couple of months than previously. From a wider perspective, obviously we actually are a large health board.
Yes, of course.
But we are trying to move to those early resolutions, working with PALS more effectively and reducing, working at the bedside to address complaints from patients and with families before they get to the point of actually being a formal complaint. And I think the streamlining of our processes around identifying that and then not tipping into formal complaints will allow us to reduce that as well. There hasn't in the last few months been any Welsh benchmarking information that we've been given, but we have picked that up with Welsh Government and hope that will come through to us shortly.
I think there is something about capturing the patient experience, isn't there? Not just complaints where people follow an official procedure, but actually, as you say, through PALS and other work, asking the patient, well, what was your journey like in this particular way, and what can we learn from that? So there's a richness there that I think we could capture and really, maximise it. So that'd be good. Unrhyw arall, unrhyw gwestiwn? Os nad oes, yna pawb yn hapus I dderbyn yr adroddiad hwn.
Everybody happy to accept this report before we turn to Rhian? Yes? Thank you very much to everyone who's been part of this work. And now we turn to Rhian, please, for your report. And you should all have had a copy beforehand. So just a chance for you, Rhian, now to draw attention to a few points you want to. In the hope that the technology will work. Thank you, David. The paper that you've got in front of you is a summary of our committee that met in June, 20th of June. But of course, I want you to know that we had a committee meeting last week as well on the 25th of July. But the timing didn't work with regard to presenting a written paper to the board today.
I think that's an issue, and I think Phil and his team are going to be helping with getting the right sequencing of committees and so that they can feed into board in a timely manner. I think it probably hasn't helped in that my committee has been meeting monthly. We decided to meet monthly for the first 6 months or so and see how it went, rather than having very long, heavy meetings, to have something more tightly focused. And I think we're all learning from that. And I'm learning as a chair as well, I think. I'm extremely picky about some things, and I need to tighten up on timing of various items. So there's learning points for me as well. If there's nothing on the 20th of June meeting, maybe I can just say what happened on the meeting last week. We had a patient's story about a person who had a double amputation, but the horrific thing was he was actually in hospital for 3 years. That really stuck out for us, and I think we spent quite a long time on the patient's story because of the nature of it, and it was very powerful. With all the other reports, we have to take them as read. We had a health and safety report, a patient safety report, a mental health update, which was very welcome, and a special measures report. And I'm very pleased about the way the reports are now being quite tightly focused, and that the people presenting are highlighting key issues. There have been a couple of occasions where I should have maybe said, just get to the point. But again, as I said, it's a learning thing for me as well. I had asked the East Integrated Health Community for a quality report so that I could understand how what happens on the three major sites can be woven together, but for various reasons, leave and sickness, that report wasn't forthcoming. So I do have to express a disappointment that couldn't have been picked up, but it will be picked up for the next meeting, which we will be holding on August the 22nd. So hopefully there'll be good time then to wrap up the July meeting and the August meeting in a written report for the next board meeting. Reflections on our meeting, other people who were there might probably tell me more than I can say, but I think I've learned as a chair what things we need to maybe focus a bit more on, and I think the other members of the committee are working really well with me, and I thank them for that, and everybody really who's making such an effort. So happy to take any questions, although I'm not 100% sure that I can answer them today. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn iawn, Rhianna. Dyn ni'n gwerthfawrogi.
Thank you, Rhianna. We appreciate the fact that you presented the report. Even though you're not well down in Pembrokeshire, and we wish you speedy recovery. And thank you for that comprehensive report of two committees, really. Any questions or comments for Rhianna?
Anybody wish to raise any matters on that committee? Os ddim, ydi pawb yn hapus?
If not, so you are happy to accept the two reports, the written one and the verbal one. And written reports will follow future. Okay, thank you. Next, we go to 3.5.
Nick, this is again one of our standard items, the update of register of approved clinicians. I think that's yours, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions. I think the report, I hope, speaks for itself. This just records the decisions made by delegated authority from the board that I make on behalf of the All Wales approval of mental health clinicians. But happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any question, Karen?
Just because my 90 weeks in the May absolutely question, because I haven't seen one of these before. And it might just be a typo, but in the first one, everyone seems to have date approval expires as 2028 by one person, is that 2025? And I didn't know whether that's just a typo of the public record. We need to correct the dates, or you won't know the answer. I'm just finding it.
I will go and check outside, but I think it relates to the onset of legislation, so that those clinicians who've been practicing for some times are all four due on the same date, and that's perpetuated by the same length of reapproval on each occasion. We'll just check there are no typos within that.
Thanks for flagging that up. Anyone else? If not, are we happy to accept that report? Thank you very much. 3.6 ydy'r item nesa.
Next item is 3.6. It's a series of committees.
We're keen to bring this to the board to report the work that's happening in these joint committees on our behalf. But today, perhaps there's an opportunity just to give a brief introduction to it, and we'll have detailed reports coming to us later, maybe.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to summarise. I attended two of the committees, joint committees, in Carol's absence. The first, this was on the July the 18th. The first was the Emergency Ambulance Services Committee. Most people will probably be aware that this is a joint committee of the 7 local health boards, focusing both on the emergency ambulance services, the Emergency Medical Retrieval and Transfer Service, EMERTS, relevant to our earlier discussion perhaps around stroke and timely transfer onto tertiary providers in England, and also the non-emergency patient transport service, NEPTS. It would perhaps be inappropriate to talk in detail about the meeting because the minutes haven't yet been published, but the agenda, which are the agendas which are on the public website, highlight the huge amounts of work that ESC has been doing over the last few months and engaging with the public around the air ambulance service provision across Wales. And some of our communications team have been very much at the heart of that work. I want to thank Katie Sargent and others for that commitment. Huge focus, as always, in those meetings, really to see whether the provision is what our population needs. And an opportunity for the local health boards to be discussing, particularly with WASC, but also with the Commissioner, how that provision works. And it was a very useful meeting. The second, which was on the same day, was the Welsh Health Specialised Services Committee. And this again is a joint committee of the local health boards, which looks at the planning for specialised services for the population of Wales. And of course, we just both contribute to that, but also receive funds from that in terms of our provision for specialised services. A lot of focus for the moment, which we are really engaging in. Some of those services are commissioned by WISC from providers in the Northwest to the population of North Wales. And indeed, some of those services are provided in our hospitals and on our sites. So really discussion in that committee around our quality monitoring of that and ensuring that the arrangements between WISC, the English provider, and us, the Welsh Health Board, to ensure that that provision is appropriate. And perhaps more focus on that than there has been historically. And thank you, Carol, for bringing much of that focus to that. Also, a lot of discussion in the meeting. The agenda, I think, made that clear around the really difficult area of individual patient funding requests, IPFRs, which are where we aren't able to provide care in the normal way, and applications are made to provide often very, very specialised services and difficult decisions about how they can be provided, and a lot of talk in the committee around the governance of that. Happy to take any questions, Chair, but I hope that provides a sketch of how that relationship works and topics discussed.
Nick, and we've also, there is a subcommittee of the Welsh Health Specialist Services Committee around quality, which Mike has kindly agreed to serve on. So that's a further link we'll have. Any questions for Nick on those committees or joint committees? If not, we will have further reports in due course for us to just keep up to date on the developments on those important links, as you say, and the way they commission some services, particularly from northwest of England on our behalf. There's also an item on the shared services partnership. I don't know if there's anything you wish to highlight for us on that, Russell.
Thank you, Chair. No, so there's been no meeting that I've attended in my time here, so I'll happily carry that forward to the next committee and update accordingly.
Something else for you to look forward to, I'm sure. So, thank you for that. Everybody happy to accept those reports then, please? Yeah, great. Diolch yn iawn. Ymlaen i'r item nesaf 3.7.
On to 3.7.
We put this on our agenda to ensure that we're cited on the discussions that happens in the Health Professions Forum, Stakeholder Reference Group, and the Local Partnership Forum, which of course is the Trade Unions Forum. Helen, I don't know, in the absence of everybody else associated with this item, I'm turning to you if you've got anything to highlight with the rhywbeth I ti siarad amdano fo.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. I can give an update on the Stakeholder Reference Group, where that group met for the first time in quite some months, chaired by
Mike Parry, and
Yes.
of course Claire has taken up her independent member role. There were a couple of items which I think the board members would be interested in. First and foremost, it cross-references with Nick's update in relation to EASC. We had the Chief Ambulance Service Commissioner for NHS Wales came and presented to members on the emergency medical retrieval and transfer service and the Wales Ambulance Charity service review. That was an interesting discussion, and members were really quite interested in that presentation and had lots of comments to give, which of course will have informed the work that has been ongoing. And no doubt we'll get an update at a later discussion. And secondly, the group had an update on special measures, which again was very warmly received. Indeed, this being the first update that they had had since changes in February. Carol joined the discussion briefly, which was very welcome, and I think offered to come and meet with the members there as well. The group is very keen to continue with both the vision, the purpose and the momentum that Claire gave it during her tenure as chair. But just to say that we talked earlier, or certainly Carol referenced the need for an end-to-end pathway around urgent and emergency care. And I think the stakeholder reference group are very keen to be involved in a co-creation of work in that area. And I know that Claire had set up, we had a workshop earlier in the year, it may have been last year, where we discussed some of the issues there that I think will be really helpful. And then the final item was on the election of the chair going forward, which I would hand over to Phil for. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, well, just very briefly, just to let the board know that there was due to Claire's departure, there's an election for a new chair. So that election is now finished. It's part of the standing orders of the health board. There is an election. It's conducted in a certain way. So I'm not able to say who's been successful at this juncture. But the election has concluded, and we'll bring the full report back to the board with the conclusion of that. So the members of the SRG have been informed that the election has been completed and there is an outcome, and now we're just completing some due diligence before we make any further announcements.
Thank you very much. So any questions, any comments? Rywun isio Olin rhywbeth ar yr adroddiad yna? Carol?
I just wondered if I should comment on the local partnership forum. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a little bit, really, Chair, no. So apologies. I just noticed that wasn't provided in the pack, and I think that's because the meeting is moved.
Yes.
I think that's around my holiday.
Because you were away.
Because I was very keen to be at the local partnership forum. Not least, that I hold a lot of stall in how we work in partnership with trade unions, but in particular, and it leads to Gareth's item AOB really, at what is quite a pressured time around, potentially pressured time around industrial relations. Of course, we don't set the pay and those sorts of matters, but it's important for us to get our partnership working on a very firm footing and recommitments made to that. So it's probably my fault that there hasn't been a meeting, but it's coming up soon. It's next week or the week after, isn't it?
Carol, yeah, I attended a meeting, I think it was a couple of months ago now, which was very constructive, and I am aware that our union representatives are very keen to be involved in the work we're doing and to engage and to offer their experience and their insight, which will be really good. So we're really grateful for the relationships we have with them, and we look forward to that meeting. Everybody happy to receive those? Diolch yn fawr iawn. Felly ymlaen at eitem 4, and mae gynnon ni
so we go on to other matters. We have got one business that's been noted already. Any other business can mean all kinds of things, but if somebody wants to bring up any additional matters, it's good to do that at the beginning of the meeting. I think that that's the principle we follow, so that we know then that we need to give sufficient time to discuss it. Gareth has made a very important point about the situation with a dispute, if that's the right word, about the pay dispute. That's not just to do with pay, of course, but working conditions as well.
Thanks for flagging that up, Gareth. Do you want to say a bit more about
I know that for many of the context, many of the health nurses and health professionals, I know this is countries, but those have been resolved. But obviously, there's action in England with the consultants and the doctors separate. There's recently been strike action by radiographers, I think. I'm not sure whether the unions in Wales are not participating because they haven't balanced it, or it's because they recognise the Welsh government doesn't have the same degree of control over the pay negotiations. But I just really was interested in knowing whether there is a risk that we will continue to have further industrial action in those groups that are taking action in England, and where there are therefore outstanding pay issues.
Thank you very much. So, Carol, if you give us a summary of sort of how the land lies at the moment.
I think the Welsh government has looked to take a different approach to the government, the UK government, in terms of discussions, negotiations, etc. And Chair's absolutely right. Whilst pay is a big issue, actually it's been a much broader set of issues. I think we're talking about different scenarios for different unions. So some unions are nearly out of time on their ballots, on their mandates, and it would be very interesting to have a look to see whether they're going to seek to refresh their mandates or not. And I think some of those are pretty imminent. I think the Royal College of Nursing might be imminent, and I think that will give us a bit of the mood music as to where the trade unions are, and they're often the non-medical trade unions who are in that set. I did happen to bump into a medical trade union, fairly senior lead in a canteen chat when I was out and about, who, wanted to apologise profusely to me for all of the sort of rumpus, but to try to explain why doctors feel quite so grieved, really, and particularly the junior doctors and the challenges for junior doctors. And I think this, whilst pay is an issue, I think it really extends much more around the life of the junior doctor. And so I am keen. Nick and I have had this discussion about what's it like to be a junior doctor in Betsy Cadwallader. What facilities do we have? How do we support? What's the quality of the training like? Because some of those things that can, at least in part, help to mitigate the issue about pay, which we have no control over. So I'm very keen for us to keep having that discussion. And when I met with that doctor, he was very keen to say, "Oh, come along and have a chat." There's a doctor's mess apparently in Wrexham, and I was invited into that. So I thought, but to be able to have that conversation about, well, what is it like? Because I'm absolutely convinced staff do not want to strike, so they feel, undervalued, underpaid, but what is it, even in this very difficult financial climate, can we do to support people? And that was the tenure of the conversation I've had as well with our trade union colleagues, non-medical. So I think there's an industrial relations at the national level, and then there's the work that we need to do. I do think that it's probably worth us reflecting now on how have we managed this industrial relations period? We have had strikes, what have we learned? There's been a lot of effort going into that. And what would we do if this continued? But on the England one, I think it's probably worth us just doing a quick check with our colleagues across the border from a commissioning point of view. How many of our population's been affected by that? Clearly, my old job now, that would have been quite significant. But hopefully that's been being kept to a minimum. Any patient being delayed is a regret, but we'll find out the numbers on that.
Yeah.
I hope that helps. I'm sorry, and it might not have completely answered the question.
No, I think that's useful. And I think what we've also flagged that is from all of this, our understanding of what our staff and our workforce, how they feel about things at the moment, you know, having gone through pandemic and also trying to work with the cost of living crisis, climate emergency, you know, people are under huge pressure. I think there is something about the offer we have as an employer, which is not just about pay, and that could turn actually into being one of our USBs, something that we can offer as Betsy Cadwallader, which is pay standard throughout Wales, of course, but what's our extra offer? What can we do different that will make us an attractive proposition in terms of the workplace? So we can take lots of things from it, working with our partners in the trade unions and getting that intelligence directly from frontline, I think is really useful. So thank you for flagging that up for us today, Gareth. That's the latest position, and I'm sure there'll be further developments over the next weeks as well. Felly, dyna ddiwedd.
So that concludes the formal meeting today. The next meeting will be on the 28th of September. Location to be determined, and the papers will be put on our website as usual. Before then, there'll be a special meeting in August for us to receive our financial report. And it'll be on the 24th. So thank you to everyone who's been part of this meeting today. Also, thanks to members of the public who've been present. Thank you if you've joined us online. And thank you to the people who made that possible, the technical and audio people. We're very grateful for your work. Everything's gone smoothly. Thank you to Llinos for her work, and to Richard and others for their preparation work for today's meeting. But mainly, thank you, all of you who've contributed today, and everybody who's presented reports that show that we've got a lot of work to do in several areas, but that there are signs of progress. And let's grab hold of those signs full of hope and enthusiasm, and let's be positive about the future in the health board. I'm feeling very positive. Yes, we need to roll our sleeves up. Yes, there are difficult things, but there's room to be positive. And on that note, that brings the meeting to an end. And thank you to all of you. There'll be a break for members for half an hour, and we'll meet again at 1:30 when we go into a private session. And I propose that we exclude the press and the public from that meeting so that we can discuss things privately according to the 1960 Act. So if you're all happy that we do that, thank you.